Welcome to the fantasy audiobook, Batman's Owl Godfather. Chapter 41. Dumbledore apparates and appears on the stone bridge outside Hogwarts Castle. Bruce still went in. His heart was heavy. A gifted child had gone astray. Quirrell, forget it. Bruce also has ideas about the Philosopher's Stone. Dumbledore was extremely disappointed and made up his mind that there would be no more Dark Lord in Hogwarts based on Tom's mistakes. Bruce, I gave you a chance. He muttered like this, preparing to enter Hogwarts. The reason why I apparate here is to give myself some psychological buffer time. However, Dumbledore had only taken a few steps when he saw two people standing outside the gate of Hogwarts, quietly waiting for his arrival. He had seen these two people in Lupin's memory. Jason Todd, and the dark wizard Gibbon. At this time, Jason was smiling. As a muggle, he stood in front of the legendary wizard Dumbledore without any scruples. You two, Dumbledore said gently. Hogwarts probably didn't invite you, right? Indeed not, we came uninvited. Jason took a step forward. Did Remus escape here? Hand him over. He is my beloved relative and friend. I don't want the next battle to affect him. Spread. Dumbledore was smiling. He knew that although Jason was good at shooting, he had no magical talent, and one or two bullets could not hurt him at all. In other words, their fight might be over in a matter of seconds. Mr. Todd, Dumbledore said, I think you may have misunderstood something. Remus is my student, and Hogwarts is his home. Dumbledore, you don't have to be so pretentious. I know you think I'm weak and not worthy of talking to you from the perspective of strength. Jason shrugged, but I also admit that I may not be able to do anything to you on my own. Dumbledore glanced at Gibbon next to Jason. Could it be that Jason thought adding this dark wizard would be enough? Don't look at him. Jason kicked Gibbon away. It has nothing to do with him. He clicked his ear, and the red metal hood automatically covered his face. I know you're probably a good person, but I'm sorry, I have my own creed too. Red Hood took the initiative to walk towards Dumbledore. I have 3 reasons why I have to take action against you. Jason spoke slowly, and Dumbledore listened quietly. Dumbledore never minded chatting with an opponent who was not a threat. First, your existence makes Remus confused, and he never dares to let go of his bottom line and pursue happiness for himself. Second, the professor at your school told me that you killed your sister with your own hands for the sake of your so-called career. Third, Jason paused for a moment before revealing his greatest hatred for Dumbledore. Third, Hogwarts, with you as the headmaster, makes Bruce Wayne feel like home. Jason's eyes became colder. I will destroy everything Bruce holds dear. Dumbledore's expression did not change at all, he was still smiling lightly. That's right, Mr. Todd, he said, but I'm not going to watch you destroy my school. I know. Jason raised his head and held out 2 fingers. A test tube was held in his hand, with green liquid flowing inside. So, let them do it. In the room of the magic stone. Then let's reason again. After comforting the lost bad boy, Caedum regained his energy. As a godfather, you must have the responsibilities of a godfather. He took out a crown from the feathers and put it on his head. The only question I can't figure out right now is, what did Quirrell get from Jason? When the crown was placed on his head, Caedum's thoughts suddenly became clear, and many clues that he had previously ignored were noticed again. Then, the owl's face became serious. I see. He sighed. As a parasitic existence of Voldemort, Quirrell originally wanted to find the Philosopher's Stone in order to resurrect Voldemort. There is no need for the Philosopher's Stone now. There can only be one reason, and that is that he got something better. He no longer has any obsession with the magic stone, so of course he can get the stone from the magic mirror. What's better than the Philosopher's Stone and has something to do with DC? After saying that, the owl raised its head and looked at Bruce, who was still in the mist. Little bat, you have to watch me carefully next. Jason came to this world from DC and brought metal with him. Outside the gates of Hogwarts, Dumbledore watched as Jason took out a test tube, raised it above his head, and then said nothing. The atmosphere at the scene suddenly became awkward. Mr. Todd, Dumbledore smiled, I'm very busy now. I know, just wait a minute. Jason was also a little angry. He turned to Gibbon and yelled, Are you okay? You're so annoying. Hurry, hurry. Gibbon raised his wand and replied submissively. He had just been restored to magic by Quirrell, and he was somewhat unaccustomed to using magic again. Then, just as Gibbon finished speaking, the ground between Jason and Dumbledore suddenly began to tremble. A black rotten wooden cabinet slowly rose from the ground. Dumbledore frowned. For some reason, he felt unprecedented pressure from this wooden box. Moreover, rather than saying that this is a wooden cabinet, it is more like coffin. We searched for nearly a year, but in the end we couldn't find them all, but it doesn't matter, 3 are enough. Jason opened the test tube, and a drop of green liquid flew out automatically and then merged into the wooden coffin. I always thought that this guy would be the hardest to find, but unexpectedly, he was the first one we found. Mainly thanks to me snatching the volume of notes and finding his seclusion in his later years. Dumbledore's heart began to beat wildly. He had already guessed what Jason was looking for. The smile on his face just now was gone. He couldn't laugh anymore. The black wooden coffin began to shake, as if something was coming out of it. Dumbledore turned his palm, and the Elder Wand appeared in his hand. Gah! The black wooden coffin slowly opened, and endless black energy surged out from the coffin. A skeletal figure wearing a worn robe walked out of it. The skeleton mage is holding a snake-shaped scepter, and every step he takes is extremely slow. Its skeleton is scattered and slowly coming together. 2 balls of soul fire ignited in his dark eyes. Who are you? The skeleton mage suddenly raised his head and looked at Dumbledore. He opened his mouth and his jaw dropped. Albus Dumbledore, current headmaster of Hogwarts. Dumbledore answered this question in the most solemn manner. Hogwarts already has a principal. Then you should have heard my name. The skeleton mage stretched out his hand and replaced the dislocated jaw. The bones rubbed together and made a crunching sound. You can call me Salazar Slytherin. Salazar Slytherin. Dumbledore's heart finally died after receiving the other party's personal recognition. He looked at Jason behind Salazar, and his anger was beyond words. No wonder Lupin had to confess to himself. What a blasphemous act to disturb the sleep of the founder of Hogwarts. Surprised, Jason said, I only need the degraded Dionysus factor and the black magic ritual, and the founder of your school can be used by me. After that, he also showed Dumbledore the tube of green liquid in his hand. Dionysus factor, a liquid metal in the DC universe, can give people the ability to live forever and revive continuously. Destroy Hogwarts. It's easy. At this time, Salazar has gradually adapted to the feeling of returning to the world. He stretched out his hand out of thin air and waited for a moment, but there was no response. The feeling of emptiness in his hand made him very dissatisfied. Where is my wand? Jason didn't know the answer to this question. It was answered by the black wizard Gibbon, who was crawling on the ground. Master Slytherin, your snakewood staff was taken to America by your descendants and buried outside Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. America, Salazar sneered, another small country split from the Holy Roman Empire. Forget it, I'll get it myself later. He turned his head and looked at Dumbledore, who was waiting for the battle. You're lucky. You can live a few more minutes against me who doesn't use a wand. Salazar said lightly, by the way, the current headmaster of Hogwarts, are you pure blood or half-blood? What's the difference between pure blood and half-blood? Dumbledore didn't want to talk more with Slytherin. This undead creature that was resurrected by blasphemous means should return to the grave even if it had a special identity in its lifetime. He pressed his fingertips on the top of the old wand and slowly separated it. A flame burned like a wire, and then immediately spread to the entire stone bridge, surrounding everyone present in a wall of fire. Dumbledore waved his wand, and the wall of fire began to stir, with flames constantly splashing out and circling in the sky, like a meteor flying in reverse. Gradually, the meteor formed a huge vortex, like an upside-down city of fire, strangling all the trapped darkness. It's the god of fire, Gibbon exclaimed. This is Dumbledore's specialty and the nightmare of the Death Eaters. The god of fire opened the way. It's obviously the Gubblerite fire. Salazar sneered, has the magic world fallen to this extent now? Even the spell can't be recognized. Gubblerite fire, also known as the eternal fire, is a flame that will not go out. Even in ancient times, it is an extremely powerful spell. However, for Salazar Slytherin, this power is not unbreakable. At first glance, his skeleton body looks like a candle in the wind, but the magic contained in it is unfathomable. Salazar didn't have a wand, so he cast the spell without a wand. He stretched out his hand and reached into the restless wall of fire. Come here, fiendfire. Boom. As soon as the words fell, the originally golden red flames were instantly transformed into dark green fiendfire, like dying. The wall of fire collapsed, and the fiendfire rushed towards Dumbledore like mercury pouring down the ground, like the collapse of the sky and the earth. At the same time, in the fiendfire, countless dark creatures generated by flames appeared, such as dementors, trolls, werewolves, octopus spiders. These fiendfire creatures gnashed their teeth and sucked blood, choosing people to devour. Dumbledore became the only target. Do you know the gap between you and me, Dumbledore? Salazar said coldly. You are just a mortal born in an era without me. Dumbledore's forehead was already soaked with cold sweat. Salazar's strength was far beyond imagination. The other party used ancient magic that had been lost for a long time. Fiendfire had already pounced in front of Dumbledore. Expecto Patronus. Dumbledore held the Elder Wand upside down and thrust it into the ground. With a clear phoenix cry, a huge phoenix shadow appeared, wrapping Dumbledore in it. The fiendfire roared, but could not penetrate even a little bit. The phoenix spread its wings and sang loudly, and the green fiendfire was forcibly dispersed, and the fiendfire creatures were also annihilated. The Patronus shadow gradually disappeared, and Dumbledore's breathing became heavier. The first confrontation between the two legendary wizards did not benefit either side. Jason frowned. That's it. Muggles, be polite, Salazar said coldly. Don't think that a soul-stealing ritual can guarantee your absolute safety. Jason raised his hands to show that he had no intention of offending. Sorry, this great wizard, I just think the efficiency is too low now. He said, I really don't have the patience to wait for you and Dumbledore to decide the winner. Let's fight quickly, Salazar sneered, but did not refute again. He waved his hand towards Dumbledore. Avada Kedavra, a dazzling green light blinded people, carrying chaotic sounds, as if the invisible god of death was flying towards Dumbledore. This was completely different from the killing curse Dumbledore had seen before. Its power was far beyond imagination, and the surging green light was like a torrent of souls. Dumbledore could not resist it. He turned around, his robe suddenly swirled, and disappeared. When this killing curse ended, he reappeared in the same place. Dumbledore escaped a killing calamity, but he did not feel at ease. Because the ground began to shake again, two new coffins rose from behind Salazar. The pattern depicted on it is an eagle and a badger. It's over. At this moment, Dumbledore felt an emotion called despair. Jason repeated his old trick, opened the test tube, and 2 drops of Dionysus Factor flew into the coffin. The new coffin was opened, and the black air was rolling, and 2 figures emerged from it. One of them had a slender skeleton, and even though she had turned into white bones over the past 1,000 years, she still maintained her elegance and temperament in her lifetime. She was wearing a blue robe and gently waved her hand to dispel the black air in front of her, with a hint of contempt and ridicule in her tone. Hogwarts, you are filthy. One of the 4 founders, Rowena Ravenclaw, returned to the world. The other one, who was shorter than Rowena and had a thicker skeleton, hung a goose-yellow robe on her body, loose. Although she was resurrected, the soul fire in her eyes was a little confused, as if she didn't understand how she became like this. One of the 4 founders, Helga Hufflepuff, has returned. I'm sorry, Dumbledore, Jason shrugged. I really can't find Gryffindor's remains, otherwise I would definitely reunite you. Dumbledore's hand holding the Elder Wand creaked. This casual attitude towards the dead has completely violated his bottom line. But now is not the time to settle accounts with Jason, because he is facing an unprecedented crisis. The overwhelming sense of oppression is rushing towards Dumbledore. Looking at the figures of the 3 founders, Dumbledore suddenly remembered the prophecy. From the beginning to the end, from yesterday to tomorrow. The shadows of the 3 Dark Lords will cover the entire castle. So that's what it means. Dumbledore smiled bitterly, and he gradually understood everything. I blamed Bruce wrongly. At this time, the battle on the stone bridge had alarmed the teachers and students in Hogwarts. Vice Principal Professor McGonagall quickly asked all students to return to their dormitories, and then led all the teachers to the gate. They thought that by gathering together, they could help Dumbledore even a little bit. But the ghost of Ravenclaw House, Ms. Grey's exclamation, completely shattered their confidence. Mother, Lady Grey, or Rowena Ravenclaw's daughter, Helena Ravenclaw, was desperate to break out of the castle gates. Bloody Barrow stopped her. Professors, you can't go out now. Bloody Barrow was as skinny as a stick, with silver blood stains on his body. He grabbed Helena and showed an unprecedented anxious look. One of the three wizards who are now facing off against Dumbledore is Rowena Ravenclaw. Lau himself. These words were like a thunder that exploded among the professors. If one of the three people Dumbledore faced was Rowena Ravenclaw, then it would not be difficult to guess the identities of the other two skeleton wizards. 3 of the 4 founders of Hogwarts have returned to the human world. Although we don't know what kind of accident happened to them, there is no doubt that they are now enemies of Hogwarts. Professor McGonagall immediately made a decision. Don't go out yet. Stay where you are. She could see clearly that this level of battle was no longer something that professors like them could intervene in. Breaking in rashly would not only not be of any help, but would also be easily affected by the aftermath of the battle, which would distract Dumbledore. But, can Dumbledore win? Professor Flitwick spoke. He was a dueling champion in his youth and had a full understanding of combat. Dumbledore was certainly very strong, but in a 1-on-3 matchup with legendary wizards from ancient times, Flitwick had no chance of winning. We'll win. Professor McGonagall had almost no hesitation. She seemed to be answering Professor Flitwick's question, but also seemed to be trying to convince herself. Dumbledore is the strongest. In the Hall of the Mirror of Arise. All scenarios have been deduced. Caedum let out a sigh of relief, took the crown of wisdom off his head, and stuffed it back into his feathers. If Jason really came to this world with the Dionysian factor, then he would definitely find a way to find the remains of powerful wizards in the past. No doubt, I would do the same thing. And Jason has always targeted you. Since you are in Hogwarts, it is self-evident whose remains he will look for. Bruce had wiped the tears from his face and regained his composure. For this reason, he naturally understood what Caedum meant. What should we do? Bruce asked anxiously. The 4 founders are resurrected, and Hogwarts can't stop it. How could Jason have found 4 human remains? Caedum sneered, and then asked Bruce, you said before that you should have a backup plan before taking action. Have you made a backup plan for this situation? Bruce shook his head, not daring to look at the owl. How could the plan reach this level? But Caedum had no intention of blaming him, and instead said, you didn't do it, right? It's okay, I did it. Bruce's eyes widened and he couldn't believe what the owl said. Can the backup plan really reach this point? I have said before that I hope Jason will bring a bit of Gotham shock to Hogwarts. I dare to say this, and I naturally have my own confidence. The owl raised his head and estimated the time. Dumbledore and the other parties should be fighting by now. The 3 founders, Jason, and Quirrell. 5 people. Caedum nodded. I originally planned to prepare only 4 people, but judging from the current situation, we also have 5. Bruce couldn't help but ask, where did you get 5 people? Boom. Dumbledore stumbled back, trying to steady himself. Opposite, a green fireball floated in the sky, almost blocking the sun. The fierce fire twisted, like thousands of snakes surging, and sparks continued to splash, hitting Dumbledore. This was the annihilation summoned by Slytherin. The solid ground of the stone bridge turned into soft sand and gravel at this time. Immediately afterwards, countless soldiers made of sand and stone walked out of the ground with sharp blades in hand, stepping on invisible stairs and walking in uniform steps. It seemed like it came from an ancient battlefield. The queen they are loyal to is the Ravenclaw lady standing indifferently behind them. Not only that, but the Hogwarts castle also began to be restless at this time. The statues and armors in the entire castle jumped off their stands, and they rushed outside the castle in a swarm to join the army of sand and stone soldiers. This scene caused Professor McGonagall, who was watching, to almost have a cardiac arrest. Yes, Stone Dune is dispatched. She, McGonagall, can use this spell to protect Hogwarts, and Rowena, who set up this protective spell back then, can naturally use it too. Whenever a sculpture or armor passes by Helga Hufflepuff, it will be blessed by ancient magic. Countless silver badgers fell on their shoulders, and the magic flowed like flowing mercury, giving them more powerful power. Even inside Salazar's fierce sun, a running fire badger appeared, causing the fierce fire to rotate rapidly and burst out more meteors. What hit Dumbledore was attack, and what hit his own stone soldiers was enchantment. Dumbledore struggled to resist the flying fire meteors, panting. Facing such a scene, he felt powerless to resist for the first time. Strong, very strong. With the combined strength of the three founders, he had exhausted all his energy just by defending. Can't win. The army of stone soldiers had already arrived in front of him. First of all, the first of the 5 people must be Dumbledore. In the basement, Cadem was explaining to Bruce. And now there is one more person, the strongest one in Hogwarts. Bruce frowned. Isn't that still Dumbledore? Really? Cadem asked. Then what do you think makes me insist on hanging out by the big lake every day? Bruce suddenly stopped talking. He remembered the story Cadem told when he first came to school. Although he is completely indifferent to worldly affairs, even if Voldemort invades Hogwarts, he will only think that it is a civil war among wizards and a historical process, and he will not take action. But the situation is different now. Some things that should have disappeared from history have reappeared, and those who didn't take action will also take action. Just when Dumbledore was about to lose his support with 1 against 3, bubbles suddenly appeared in the lake behind Hogwarts. Gululu. Like boiling, a dark shadow grew larger and larger under the water. Finally, with the deafening sound of breaking waves, a huge creature broke through the shackles of the lake and leapt high. It's a giant squid. It jumped out of the water and flew over Hogwarts, a huge black shadow covering the entire castle. The place where the giant squid is about to fall is the stone bridge in the battle. The professors below raised their heads, shocked by the strange scene in front of them, but they did not understand why such a situation occurred. The giant squid flew above the stone bridge, and its huge size suddenly began to shrink rapidly. When it landed on the stone bridge, it was only the size of a human being. No, that's a human being. He was tall and tall, with thick beard and hair, wearing a dark red robe, and his pupils seemed to be beating like a lion. Dumbledore vaguely guessed something. You are. The other party didn't answer, just stretched out his hand. The Sorting Hat is coming. Bang dang. The Sorting Hat smashed through the window of the principal's office and flew into the man's hands. He stuck his hand into the Sorting Hat. Base. A silver sword inlaid with rubies was pulled out from the Sorting Hat, clanking in the man's hand like a dragon's roar. Old friend. He held the silver sword and looked at Salazar Slytherin. I never thought we would see each other again in this life. The fire of the soul flickered in Salazar's eyes. Godric Gryffindor, are you still alive? The appearance of Godric Gryffindor became the biggest variable in this battle. The pressure on Dumbledore's shoulders was suddenly relieved, and the confidence of the professors watching the battlefield was greatly increased. Thousands of years ago, Godric defeated countless opponents with a wand in one hand and a silver sword in the other, leaving behind a reputation as the strongest duelist. And now, he has even defeated death. Thousands of years have passed. To what extent has Gryffindor's power grown? No one can imagine it. The balance of victory has quietly changed. They're starting to do it again. Ravenclaw, who had turned into a skeleton, helplessly held his forehead, and then motioned to Hufflepuff not to interfere. Let them resolve the grievances between these two guys by themselves. What a pathetic look, Salazar. Godric raised his sword and looked at Salazar with a trace of sadness in his eyes. You even have your own heart controlled by others. Stop talking nonsense. Salazar clenched the snake staff in his hand, and the fire of his soul became stronger. You had such a disgusting face when you opposed my ideas. Salazar was now extremely angry and finally revived, but not long after he opened his eyes, he saw something dirty. Disgusting, disgusting. He suddenly raised the snake-shaped scepter and hit it hard. Boom. For a moment, Slytherin's fiery sun began to expand rapidly, so powerful that it replaced the real sun in a trance. The flames emitted a strange stream of light, like countless snake tails, swaying toward the sky, dancing to the melody of destruction. The surrounding temperature also began to rise, and the stone bridge was burned red, with faint signs of melting into liquid. When the fiery sun expanded to its extreme, time seemed to stand still for a moment. Then, the sun disintegrated and fire rain descended, like the wrath of the gods, pouring down to turn everything into ashes. Calling God. Facing this scene, Dumbledore subconsciously summoned the patron Saint Phoenix to resist the fierce fire. But before he could finish the spell, Gryffindor had already stepped forward. His sword is forged by fairies and can absorb filth and turn it into its own power. He waved the silver sword casually, and the flames all over the sky were immediately drawn, and went straight to the blade of the silver sword, and then were absorbed completely, leaving only countless white smoke floating behind Gryffindor, and the sword was outlined into a pale big flag. Then, Gryffindor swung his sword with his backhand, slashed out a golden flame, turned it into sword energy, and directed it towards Slytherin. The speed of the sword energy exceeded the limit that the naked eye could capture. Salazar didn't have any time to react before he was hit directly by the sword energy. Before he could even scream, his skeletal body was shattered into pieces. Dumbledore was stunned. The professors were also dumbfounded. So simple. Win. Professor Flitwick roared heartbreakingly. Snape also nodded. With Godric's power, victory is inevitable. Professor McGonagall smiled. There is nothing to be afraid of anymore. The professors had no control over their voices, and all conversation fell into the battlefield. However, Gryffindor was not happy at all when hearing these encouraging words. He raised his brows, turned to Dumbledore and said, "Albus, could you please supervise your professors?" "What's wrong?" Dumbledore was a little confused. "Words are magical." Gryffindor's expression became a little strange. "If they continue talking, the good situation will be reversed." "Forget it, it's too late." As the words fell, Salazar's broken skeletal body suddenly began to gather together again. In just the blink of an eye, he stood up again, unscathed. Gryffindor sighed. "It's troublesome. There is no point in continuing the attack. Salazar is now an existence that cannot be burned to death even by powerful fire." Ha 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 ha. Suddenly, a burst of laughter came. That was Quirrell's voice. He ran from afar, knelt on the ground a long way away, and slid all the way to Salazar's side. "Lord Slytherin, you were really resurrected." Quirrell's face was filled with ecstasy beyond reason. He trembled and knelt at Salazar's feet. Sarah looked at the dark wizard who suddenly appeared, and a trace of confusion suddenly flashed in her eyes. He raised his head first and said to Gryffindor, "Wait for a while, I have something to do." Godric shrugged, letting him do as he pleased. "The lion, which represents courage and justice, will not make a sneak attack." Slytherin looked at Quirrell again. "I feel a blood connection in you. Are you my descendant?" "No, it's not me. It's my master." Quirrell quickly untied the turban wrapped around his head. Under everyone's gaze, a hideous and terrifying face appeared on the back of Quirrell's head. What Dumbledore least expected to see happened. "Voldemort, you are indeed not dead." Voldemort ignored Dumbledore, but immediately expressed his loyalty to his ancestors. "Lord Slytherin, I am a descendant of the Gaunt family, your direct bloodline." "Gaunt family, Voldemort." Slytherin looked at Voldemort and saw directly into his weakened soul. "You do have my blood, but you can't do anything in your current state, so just go ahead." "Yes." After receiving the instruction from his ancestor, Voldemort did not hesitate and immediately asked Quirrell to obey and retreat obediently. The resurrection that Jason talked about was real. Voldemort finally saw the hope of resurrection. The reward for his cooperation with Jason was a drop of Dionysus Factor. Next, he only needed to create a body to be perfectly resurrected. On the other side, Salazar readjusted to the fighting state. In his opinion, the previous fight was just a mutual test. He had a small defeat, but he also had something to say. He did not use his full strength. Gryffindor had already drawn his treasure, but he did not even have a wand. It was obviously not equal. But that was it. He, Salazar, also had his own treasure. At this time, Voldemort was so excited that he almost trembled. With the support of his ancestors, the resentment and hatred over the past 10 years will be repaid. He was already laughing wildly in his heart. Suddenly, Salazar stretched out his hand and said, "Fly the soul box." As the spell sounded, a locket suddenly flew out of the Black House at number 12 Grimmauld Place in London. It crossed hundreds of miles at a very fast speed and was in Salazar's hands in the blink of an eye. As soon as the locket was in his hand, Salazar felt something was wrong. He checked it a little and knew the reason. He immediately cursed. "Which lifeless thing turned my treasure into a Horcrux?" Voldemort suddenly stopped laughing. "How disgusting." Salazar gritted his teeth, and his magic power surged. In the blink of an eye, he strangled the soul fragments in the locket. At the same time, Voldemort's face behind Quirrell suddenly showed an extremely painful expression. But he was holding back and didn't dare to scream. Once a sound was made, it would be equivalent to confessing in front of Slytherin. At the same time, Salazar's act of summoning the treasure reminded Hufflepuff, who had been watching the show. She also has a treasure circulating in the world, could it be made into a Horcrux? No, I must check it. So Hufflepuff stretched out his hand and chanted the spell, Golden Cup Flying. Hearing this spell, Voldemort wanted to kneel on the spot. Gringotts, underground vault. The sound of dong 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 continued to come, as if something was constantly hitting the iron door of the vault. The goblins on duty found something unusual, and the first thing they thought of was that someone had broken in. But before they could verify it, the heavy door of a vault was suddenly knocked open, and a golden cup suddenly broke through the ground and flew into the sky, knocking down a goblin along the way. After the goblin was knocked away, he saw stars and it took him a long time to regain consciousness. Then he immediately jumped up from the ground and shouted, "Emergency alert, emergency alert." Still in a very short time, the golden cup flew back to Helga Hufflepuff's hands. Then Helga found that her golden cup had also been made into a Horcrux. There really is something dirty. Helga also strangled the soul fragments in it casually. Voldemort once again felt the pain of the soul being destroyed, and the pain pierced his head, but he still did not dare to make a sound. I really didn't dare to make a sound. After strangling the dirty thing, Helga reminded Rowena Ravenclaw, "You should also check your treasure, I'm afraid it has also been made into a Horcrux." The crown of wisdom was contaminated, and Helga felt unlucky just thinking about it. But Rowena was very calm. "I can't check it. You know that my treasure was stolen by my daughter. She cast a shielding spell, and I can't sense the crown." Hearing this, Voldemort burst into tears. "Thank you, Ms. Ravenclaw, you are the most gentle and kind among the 4 founders. I should have been assigned to Ravenclaw College. Hearing you say that, I remember that you seemed to be angry to death because of this." Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff were good friends in their lifetime. When Rowena died, Helga was sad for a long time. But now after resurrection, Helga did not have any emotional fluctuations when talking about the tragedy of her friend again. The soul-stealing ritual distorted the kindness of Hufflepuff. Helga held her golden cup, and suddenly thought that since she had summoned the treasure back, she might as well use it. She stretched out her finger and tapped the edge of the golden cup 3 times. A pool of clear water suddenly gushed out of the cup until it was full. Helga drank a sip of the water in the cup, and the clear water turned into a water column, moistening every bone in Hufflepuff's skeleton. Then, something incredible happened. A layer of transparent skin first appeared on the surface of Hufflepuff's skeleton, and then the skin expanded, supporting the loose robe. Then, Hufflepuff's body began to repair itself, and turned back into human flesh and blood at a speed visible to the naked eye. Helga Hufflepuff, from a skeleton, returned to the kind appearance of a fat red-haired woman in her lifetime, even younger, looking only in her early 30s. But in her eyes, there was less tolerance and kindness. "Helga," Ravenclaw suddenly spoke, "I'll drink a sip too." "No more." Helga wiped the water stains on her mouth and refused to blurt out. "I'm not asking you, I'm informing you." Ravenclaw waved his finger, and the golden cup flew out of Helga's control, but Helga didn't care and let the golden cup go. Rowana caught the golden cup, and there was still half of the water in it. She drank half a cup of water, and the same scene happened to Ravenclaw. Her body began to repair, and she turned from a skeleton back to a human. She looked much younger, but her temperament did not change. She still had a faint teasing smile on her face, beautiful, but a little intimidating. At this time, Rowena found that Salazar in front of her looked back. "Don't look, it's really gone." Ravenclaw turned the golden cup upside down and gestured, "And you look pretty good now, better than the monkey face you had when you were alive." "I didn't want it anyway." Slytherin turned his head back coldly. In the distant professor group, the ghost Helena saw the familiar face of her mother and cried even more heartbreakingly. She wanted to run back to her mother immediately and kneel before her to confess. The bloody Baron almost couldn't stop her. "That's not the real Ravenclaw lady." Baron kept warning Helena in her ear, "She's just a monster who has resurrected from a dead body, not your mother." As soon as he finished speaking, he felt a pair of eyes staring at him, as if he was on a thorn in his back. The bloody Baron turned his head mechanically and saw Ravenclaw looking at him from a distance. There is no doubt that she must have seen Helena. However, as Baron said, Rowena did not show any emotion she should have, as if she had only seen two strange ghosts. She had lost love. At the scene, no one noticed that a guy who had a strong presence had disappeared. Jason Todd, when Gryffindor appeared, realized that he was no longer needed here. So he used the body skills taught by the Bat family to leave this place of right and wrong. He was going to find his real goal. The little bat trapped underground. Basement, Oris room. Bruce had heard all of Ketum's plans. He understood everything else, except one thing. Why do you think Batman can be the fifth person? Bruce said with a wry smile, I've already failed. And he lost so badly that he was mocked by Quirrell in person. Because Bruce Wayne can admit his failure, but Batman can't. Ketum asked back, do you want Batman's first appearance to become a black history that cannot be mentioned? Quirrell mocked your dream, don't you want to get back at him? And Jason, this guy is about to turn the tables, shouldn't you beat him up? In fact, you just need me to do it, I can take you away from here at any time. But Bruce, think about it, isn't it time for Batman to come out and clean up the mess? These words touched Bruce's heart and aroused his unwillingness. But he realized that he still had many shortcomings now. I can't do anything now. Bruce shook his head, how can I turn the tables with a Batman like me? Ketum smiled lightly. It's very simple, I just pretend to be Batman, right? After saying that, his breath finally stopped concealing and showed out. The connection between souls synchronized Bruce's and Ketum's heartbeats. On the wall, the owl's figure grew larger and larger, and he spread his wings, covering Bruce. At the same time, Bruce's shadow began to lengthen, as if an 11-year-old child suddenly became a 20-something. Finally, Ketum and Bruce merged into one, and a Batman who had never existed appeared in this world. His appearance was the same as the Batman in the main world, but his soul was another soul. Hee hee. Batman looked at his current appearance and laughed wildly. Ha, ha ha, ha, cough 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 vomit, I laughed too much. Ketum clenched his fists, feeling the long-lost human body. Bruce temporarily handed over the control of his body, but he could still see all the changes outside, and even talk to the owl. Ketum. Before leaving Aerith Hall, Bruce gave his last advice. Don't kill people. Don't kill people in the name of Batman. It's okay. Ketum motioned Bruce to rest assured, Quirrell is not a human. After saying that, he threw his cloak, apparated, and disappeared from the basement. The stone bridge outside Hogwarts Castle. Salazar made a hissing sound, which sounded gloomy and terrifying, as if summoning something. Then, in the ancient pipe connecting Hogwarts to the Great Lake, a subtle sound broke the calm of the lake. A black shadow slid out of the pipe mouth silently and moved along the bottom of the lake. As the shadow approached, the water surface began to ripple. Suddenly, a huge snake head broke out of the water, splashing water. The snake head was like a hill, spitting out snake tongue. This was the basilisk sleeping in the Chamber of Secrets, and now it was awakened by its real master. Salazar jumped onto the snake head and looked down at his former friend and lifelong enemy, Gryffindor. When the basilisk appeared, Dumbledore immediately put the Elder Wand to his throat and warned everyone loudly, don't look into its eyes. Anyone who makes eye contact with the basilisk will die on the spot. Gryffindor narrowed his eyes, stared at Salazar, and sighed, you always do things so recklessly. There are so many children in the school, and they are still so unscrupulous to summon the basilisk. He jumped up, his body deformed in the air, and Gryffindor once again turned into a giant squid and crashed into the basilisk and Salazar. The basilisk couldn't dodge, and its head was directly hit into the water. For a moment, the lake surface was churning, and the waves were higher than the stone bridge. The giant squid was fighting with the basilisk, and its tentacles tightly bound the basilisk, and took Salazar and them into the bottom of the lake. The lake surface was constantly rising and falling like boiling water. Although the underwater battle could not be seen by the naked eye, it was not difficult to imagine how fierce it was. On the bridge, only Dumbledore was left alone. Quirrell laughed wildly. He stood beside the remaining two founders and taunted, Dumbledore, you can't beat the three of us. Dumbledore could not refute this sentence. The dead resurrected by the Dionysus factor had infinite self-healing ability. Even if he defeated Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff at the cost of his life, they could be reborn soon. The only way now was to see if he could take them to another place and find a way to seal them. But, could he do it? Rowena and Helga would definitely be on guard against this. What to do? Just when Dumbledore felt powerless, an unexpected voice suddenly sounded beside him. The dead are resurrected. I have no regrets in death if I can see this kind of scene. Dumbledore turned around and saw an unexpected face. Nico, Newt, the legendary alchemist Nickel Flamel and the outstanding dropout of Hogwarts Newt Scamander appeared beside him at this time. They apparated to Dumbledore's side without knowing when. Seeing these two people, Dumbledore breathed a sigh of relief, but was still a little puzzled. Why are you here? Isn't it the letter you sent us at Christmas? Nico asked back. The letter said that Hogwarts will be in danger. When you leave Hogwarts, the danger will begin. On the other side, Newt, who was nearly 100 years old, also nodded. The letter also said that we should be prepared for battle. At Newt's feet, a cowhide box was shaking constantly, as if something wanted to come out. Dumbledore was confused by their answers. Letter? What letter? He didn't send a letter to these two people. But now is not the time to worry about this. With Nico and Newt here, Dumbledore won't have to fight alone. The battle started again. The new member Nico conjured a ball of clay in his hand. He kneaded it a few times, and when he opened his hand, countless clay figurines jumped out of his palm, growing in the wind until they were 3 or 4 meters high. They formed a wall to block the Ravenclaw soldiers. Alchemy, Ravenclaw sneered, I just happen to know a little bit. On the other side, Newt stood in front of Hufflepuff. Hello. Newt took off his hat and saluted. Ms. Helga, I am a student of Hufflepuff, it's an honor to meet you. Helga nodded, which was also a greeting. Newt did not position himself as a combat wizard. Generally speaking, he would avoid conflicts with others. But if he really had to fight, he would not be afraid of anyone. Newt kicked the box next to him, and the box opened automatically. A huge creature with a bulging back jumped out of the box. It had long horns, looked like a saber-toothed tiger, and had slippery tentacles around its mouth. Purple Horn, an extremely dangerous magical creature, is extremely aggressive. Newt brought several of these creatures this time. In addition, there are many surprises waiting for Hufflepuff to unlock. When Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff were led away, Quirrell, who was originally complacent, suddenly felt something was wrong. Now he was the only one standing there. Across from him, Dumbledore was constantly turning the old wand in his hand, staring at him coldly. How did things turn out like this? Quirrell kept thinking back to what happened. What exactly happened? Jason had clearly resurrected the 3 founders, but now it was his turn to fight Dumbledore. Jason was walking in the corridor of Hogwarts Castle. When he came in, the professors guarding the door did not notice it at all. The portraits on the wall covered their eyes one by one, indicating that they saw nothing. When Jason walked to the position given by Quirrell, he heard inconspicuous footsteps. A little wizard sneaked out of the dormitory and wanted to get involved in the battle to defend the castle. Is this called a school? Jason was angry. The children in this school were so fearless. When they entered the school in obvious danger, the first thing they thought of was not to protect themselves, but to show off their abilities beyond their capabilities. Such students would be honest in the United States. Jason took out his gun and prepared to fire 2 blanks to scare away the group of students who didn't know how to live or die. But before he fired, he heard a very low voice. Leviosa. The Gryffindor students hiding in the corner suddenly floated up automatically and were taken to their dormitories by invisible forces. Jason frowned and tightened his finger on the trigger. Who? He felt that the person was not friendly. After asking this question, a black figure appeared in front of him. The other party floated in the air, and his cloak fluttered. Behind him, countless bats danced like a cloud of disaster from the sky. When he saw that face, Jason seemed to be greatly shocked, his pupils trembled, and the words were stuck in his mouth but he couldn't say them. His throat was dry. You are. Can't you recognize this? The other party slowly floated down, tiptoeing to the ground. I am Revenge, I am the Knight. Kadam lowered his voice and said the name that Jason thought about day and night. I am Batman. Kadam was very satisfied with the appearance he designed, but Bruce kept asking questions in his mind. How did you fly? Bruce, all I can say is, think about it. Kadam said, if you put a levitation spell on your shoes, wouldn't they make them fly? The same goes for the windless automatic cloak. Next, watch and study carefully, and see how I kill people and kill people. The current Batman does not look like a teenager, but has the body shape of an adult after being cast by Kadam on an age-increasing spell. All this is to satisfy Jason's fantasy about Batman. Create an unforgettable encounter for him. Obviously, the effect is significant. Bruce. Jason held both guns tightly in his hands and pointed them at Batman. You are finally willing to come out. His mind was already in turmoil. In fact, if according to Querel's original statement, he had trapped Bruce in the basement, then Batman should not have appeared here. And this Batman is obviously not a child. There are too many doubts in the middle. If you calm down and think about it, you will find that something is wrong. But Jason couldn't control that much. He came to this world just to avenge Batman. If the other person was a child, he would have many worries. Now that Batman is an adult, he can let go. Bang bang bang. Jason fired without hesitation. With the state of mind of a beast, he shot towards the heart of his adoptive father. However, Kadam didn't even move, letting the dense bullets rain down on him. When he was about to be hit, he raised his hand. In an instant, it was like an invisible wall spread out in front of him, and the bullet stopped in midair. With a wave of Kadam's finger, the bullet changed direction and was aimed at Jason. Go! The bullet fired by Jason was now given kinetic energy again and shot towards Jason himself. Jason dodged awkwardly, barely letting the bullet hit him. Is there any way to cast a spell with your hand? Bruce asked curiously in his mind. Wandless spellcasting does not require arm command, right? The hand that Kadam used to block the bullet just now was undoubtedly an advanced application of the floating spell. But since you can cast spells without a wand, why do you still need to use your arms to direct? There's no explanation, Kadam said casually, it's just that he looks more handsome like this. Okay, back to reality, Jason laughed hysterically. I knew it, I knew it. As if convincing himself, he accused Bruce of his crime. You really had reservations when you taught me. You never taught me this kind of magic method, or even showed it to me. Jason is worthy of being the Robin trained by Bruce. He is now paranoid that Bruce is partial to him. Maybe you never even cared about him. Kadam made a sarcastic remark to Bruce. You see, the education methods must be changed in the future, otherwise good children will be driven crazy. With that, he returned his attention to Jason. I don't understand what's surprising you. Batman said coldly, what you don't know about this world is far beyond your imagination. After saying that, he suddenly pointed to the sky and the ground. No weapons allowed here. Batman seems to be commanding the world, speaking his own laws. The two guns in Jason's hands suddenly flew out of his hands uncontrollably and fell to the ground. No matter how he picked it up after that, the two guns would fall again. Just like Batman said, weapons are prohibited here. This scene also opened Bruce's eyes. How did you do it? What a power this is that can actually make laws for the world. Don't underestimate the Demon King. Kadam pretended to be a little bit at first, and then revealed the truth. It's disarming. I used the disarming spell. The disarming spell is Harry Potter's best weapon. A very common spell in the wizarding world. Just a disarming spell, Bruce asked, but every time Jason picked up the guns, they would fall from his hands. Because I used the disarming spell many times. If Jason heard Kadam's answer, he would be so angry that he would vomit blood. Bruce, didn't I tell you to think more? Kadam said, don't underestimate any magic spell. They are extremely skilled and have unexpected power. What he said was not nonsense. Kadam has always felt that in the world of Harry Potter, the use of spells actually requires proficiency. When the proficiency reaches the highest level, the power of the spell will change qualitatively. For example, in Fantastic Beasts 2, in order to block Grindelwald's flames that could burn Paris, Nico Flamel used a curse that would end in all the evil. It may seem grand, but it's actually just a universal cracking spell. It was Nico's own strength and his extremely high proficiency in magic spells that allowed him to use a universal spell to have the effect of a forbidden spell. The same is true for Kadam, but the spell he practices diligently is a silent spell. The combination of wandless casting and silent casting can produce unexpected results. For example now, Jason, Batman regretfully said, I know that regrettable things happen to you, but these have passed, and we should look to the future. Impossible. Jason's fists clenched loudly, unwilling to bow to Batman at all. He had suffered so much and now he was asking him to write it off. Absolutely impossible. Even if he couldn't use weapons, he wouldn't necessarily lose just by relying on his fighting skills. He has an unforgettable hatred, and all of it will be transformed into his power at this moment. Batman sighed. Then there's nothing we can do. After saying that, he suddenly stretched out his hand and opened his palm. Jason is coming. Brush. Jason suddenly felt that his body was completely out of control, and his whole body floated into the air, flying in the direction of Batman. And there, Batman's fists were ready. Boom. The magic blessed fist hit Jason's face hard. Jason flew out like a kite with its string cut off. Batman Yun Danfang put his hands behind his back and shook them calmly. I was careless. I punched Jason's metal hood just now, and my hand hurts a little now. You just rely on your magic. When Jason stood up again, his hood was already dented, but he was still extremely dissatisfied and even provoked Bruce. If you only use the skills you taught me, I can definitely beat you. What he meant was simply that Batman was no match for him in physical combat. Kadam nodded. Okay, I will beat you until you are convinced. Bruce was a little worried. Do you really want to fight him in close combat? My physical fitness is not that strong. He couldn't understand that if he fought, he would fight. How could he give up his advantage? It is originally the body of an 11-year-old child. Even if it reaches adulthood, its physical fitness is only at the average level of ordinary adults. Kadam, however, seemed very confident. It's okay. I'll use my magic power to bless your body. It's no problem to beat Jason violently. Bruce, didn't you just promise not to use magic? Just listen, don't take it seriously. Kadam shook his head in his mind and said, there is no need to talk about morality when dealing with such a stubborn guy. With Batman's promise, Jason's confidence soared instantly. The battle is about to break out. Jason's straight punch shot out like a cannonball, but Batman sidestepped it at an astonishing speed. Immediately afterwards, Kadam counterattacked with an elbow, but Jason nimbly dodged it. The two kept changing positions, moving faster and faster, and every contact was accompanied by the muffled sound of muscles and the collision of bones. They fought like trapped animals. Jason's breathing became heavier and heavier. Kadam put great pressure on him. During the battle, even his hood was pulled off. Jason's physical strength continued to drain away, and flaws began to appear in his movements. All of his fighting moves were easily parried by Batman. Suddenly, Batman jumped up high and punched out with both palms, hitting Jason's neck powerfully. Jason staggered, and although he didn't fall down, his breathing was messed up. Finally, due to an oversight in defense, Batman's iron fist hit him in the face. Then came the violent blows of the iron fist of justice. Why are you so stubborn? Kadam punched Jason so hard that he burst into tears. Why can't you feel my love for you? Another punch knocked out 2 of Jason's teeth. Why do you come to this world to cause trouble to others? Punch after punch, without sparing any effort, the Jasons were stunned and their whole faces were bruised and swollen. As if Kadam didn't think it was enough, he followed up with a turning kick, kicking Jason out and hitting the wall hard. Jason struggled to stand up, but Batman didn't give him a chance. He quickly stepped forward and delivered a heavy iron rock, causing Jason to finally lose the ability to stand. Impossible. Jason fell to the ground, coughing up blood, breathing heavily, and his face was burning with pain. He couldn't understand how he could lose. And he lost so easily. Give it up, Jason. Batman was condescending and said the same thing. Stop dwelling on the past, you should look to the future. I won't forgive you. Jason gritted his teeth, unwilling to give in. I will destroy everything about you, everything you value. Well, Kadam sighed, is this still the point? The only way to get Jason to admit his fault was to kill him. He raised his head and softened his tone. You can't destroy everything I hold dear. I can. Jason roared. Then go kill yourself. Suddenly, Batman's answer blocked all Jason's next words. His expression was dull for a moment, and he didn't know what Batman meant. Is that what he meant? Kadam felt that this was not enough, so he simply picked up Jason, looked directly into his eyes, and said, I don't understand why you can be so confused. Why should I give up on you? I will never give up on you. Jason, you are my favorite Robin. Boom. Jason's mind went blank for a moment. What did he just hear? Did Batman really say this himself? Why are you saying it now? If he had told himself this earlier, he wouldn't have chased Bruce into this world. On the other side, Bruce felt goosebumps rising all over his body. You are my favorite Robin. He exaggeratedly repeated Kadam's words, then asked with wide eyes, how did you say such a thing? It just came out of my mouth. Kadam answered casually, if I have the opportunity to meet Dick or Tim in the future, I will say the same thing. Dick is the first-generation Robin, and Tim is the third-generation Robin. They are all Batman's wings. It has to be said that this heart-piercing words are really effective. Jason no longer had the idea of resisting. As Kadam let go, he fell to the ground, his eyes dull, and kept repeating Kadam's words. I am your favorite Robin, I am your favorite Robin. Ah, Jason. Kadam squatted down and patted Jason on the shoulder, if you were smarter, why would we have to do this? After that, he stretched out his hand to Jason. Okay, hand over the Dionysus factor. Hearing these words, Jason's eyes suddenly became sharp. Dionysian factor, he said in a stiff tone, so you lied to me when you just said those words to me, right? You just wanted to get the Dionysian factor. Even Bruce felt something was wrong. Kadam, you shouldn't be so direct. Only Kadam still looked relaxed at the scene. His eyes when he looked at Jason were full of hatred. Idiot. After saying that, he raised his right hand. Grow big quickly. This time he directly recited the expansion spell. As he finished speaking, his right hand began to expand, and in the blink of an eye it became like a giant's right arm. Jason was dumbfounded, his entire body was shrouded in the shadow of Kadam's fist. Did you see this hand? I could have hit you with this fist just now. Kadam shook his right arm, feeling like the earth was shaking, but I didn't, do you know why? Jason shook his head blankly. Because I never regarded you as an enemy. Kadam cast a spell silently and restored his right arm to its original shape. Jason, you are my family. Family members cannot use such extreme methods. The word, family, immediately made Jason's head spin. Every word Kadam said to him today was a critical strike plus real damage, directly hitting the weakest place in Jason's heart. He is not an orphan that people hate and dogs hate, he also has a family. What does a small Dionysian factor count if he can be recognized as a family member by Batman himself? He finally took out the test tube and handed it to Kadam. Kadam took it with peace of mind and put it away. Being able to hand over the Dionysian factor shows that Jason is relieved. At this moment, a dark light covered Jason's body. He just took a look and understood what was going on. Looks like my time has come. Jason smiled bitterly and said, my contract with Barbados is to capture you back, but now that I have given up this idea, the contract will automatically expire and I have to return to my own world. Is there any other way to say this? Kadam saw that Jason was looking at him with expectant eyes, as if he still had some unfulfilled wishes. Well, Kadam immediately understood what it meant. He lowered his body, hugged Jason, and patted his back. There is nothing to regret. Go back to your own world and start a new life. Don't cling to the past. After saying this, Kadam let go and saw that Jason finally smiled, with 2 teeth missing in his mouth. He couldn't help but add, when I go back, I will also get my teeth filled. Ask Wayne Group to reimburse you for the fillings. Thank you, Bruce. Jason finally remembered one thing, I still have a friend named Lupine in this world. I promised to help him change his life, but it seems I can't do it now. I don't want to break my promise, Bruce. Can I leave Lupin to you? Can. Kadam nodded without hesitation. I, Bruce, promise you. Jason finally had no regrets anymore. He raised his head and said goodbye to the past in a relieved tone. Today is my best day ever. After that, Jason's body turned into a stream of light and disappeared into this world. Okay, let's solve one. Kadam stood up, walked to the other side, and picked up the red metal hood that had been removed and left in this world. We don't have much time. Let's move faster, otherwise we won't be able to catch up. Can't catch up with what? Bruce had been silent just now, and he saw his own shadow in Jason. But Kadam's words made him nervous again. Is there something else going on? Nothing, Kadam said casually. If we don't move faster, Quirrell might be beaten to death. When Kadam walked out of the castle, he saw an almost doomsday scene. In the big lake, the basilisk and the giant squid were entangled together, causing huge waves. Fire dragons were flying in the sky, and their breath of fire kept attacking a huge badger-shaped shadow, but it was immediately resolved. On the bridge, countless alchemy giants formed a queue to attack each other. The bridge trembled and was about to collapse. Because of the existence of the Dionysus factor, the three founders are almost immortal. Hogwarts is on the verge of collapse. As for Quirrell, he had been tied up with golden ropes by Dumbledore, his eyes were closed, and he did not know whether to live or die. The back of Quirrell's head was completely bald, and Voldemort didn't know when he had slipped away. Looks like I missed it. Kadam was very sorry. He said to Bruce, Chi Luo has been dealt with. I originally wanted to find a place for you and let him taste justice. Forget it, this will be blamed on Voldemort later. Now it's time to end this farce. After saying that, he jumped up and stood at the top of the gate. Quiet, his voice was amplified 1,000 times, covering the entire Hogwarts. Everyone raised their heads and looked at the black figure that suddenly appeared. No one has seen him or knows who he is. Batman raised the red hood high in his hand, and the cape rustled behind him. Seeing the hood, the scene instantly became quiet. Jason is dead. Such thoughts spread in everyone's mind, even overshadowing the doubts about Batman's identity. If Jason really died, the impact would be immeasurable. The soul-stealing ritual after the Founder's resurrection required Slytherin and others to pledge allegiance to Jason. Now that Jason was dead, they were free. After Salazar's soul fire flickered a few times, he found that Jason's existence was indeed no longer found. Waste, he really died like this. He cursed a few words at first, and then realized that Jason's death was a good thing for him. So he immediately made a decision. Godric, you saved your life today, let's continue our battle later. Salazar was free, and the most important thing now was to get himself back to his prime. Gryffindor frowned and realized that Salazar wanted to leave. He wanted to stop him, but it was too late. Salazar laughed wildly. If he wanted to leave, no one could stop him. He performed apparition and disappeared from the top of the basilisk in an instant. At the same time, Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff made the same decision. As the three founders left, the alchemical giants turned into gravel, and the badger-shaped phantoms also collapsed on the spot. We can't let them go. Dumbledore realized this immediately. Once these three people successfully leave, there will be endless troubles. Gryffindor's eyes sank, and he also apparated and chased after them. This time, Slytherin really retreated victoriously, showing his calmness, while Gryffindor hurriedly chased after them, unable to hide his decline. Bruce was also a little anxious. Kadam, are you just going to watch them leave? What else can we do? If we continue to fight, Hogwarts will be gone. Kadam said, they have Dionysus factors in their bodies. Before finding a solution, a ceasefire is the best choice. Bruce didn't understand a little. If we can't solve them now, won't it be more difficult to deal with them later? Well, Kadam said vaguely, maybe we can only leave it to the god of death. The collapse crisis of Hogwarts has passed for some time. Jason and Quirrell's conspiracy was completely dismantled, and the only cloud left was the rebirth of the three founders of Hogwarts. They were previously controlled by the soul-stealing ritual and became Jason's tools. Now that Jason has disappeared, they can't find the meaning of their existence. In the huge confusion, they can only choose to retreat temporarily. As Gryffindor caught up, the four founders disappeared together. Everyone knew they were still alive, but they didn't know where they were. In addition, the person who solved Jason and appeared in public has also become the focus of conversation during this period. Everyone says Batman is the patron saint of Hogwarts. Bruce went downstairs to the end-of-year party, and Justin followed him, chattering away. That makes sense, right? There are so many bats in Hogwarts, maybe one of them will become Batman. Batman is the name given by the man himself. After the battle, he had a secret conversation with Dumbledore, Nicholas Flamel and others. The students didn't know exactly what they talked about, they just knew it must be something big. I'm not interested in Batman. Bruce walked forward without looking away. That's just a weirdo in tights. Batman is not a weirdo. Justin protested, and then followed Bruce. Listen carefully to what I am telling you. I believe that after listening, you will also become a fan of Batman. Bruce still looked disinterested. His thoughts unconsciously drifted back to the secret conversation on the day the battle ended. The Deathly Hallows. In the principal's office, a roll of bandages flew in the air, automatically bandaging Dumbledore's wounds. Nick Flamel and Newt sat aside, both looking a little sluggish. They had not experienced today's high-intensity battle for many years. But at this time, these three people didn't care about themselves. They were completely shocked by the term Batman said. Don't you know? Kadam shrugged. The Deathly Hallows are the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone and the Invisibility Cloak. I know. Dumbledore quickly signaled Batman to stop. Mr. Batman, we just haven't digested everything you just said. Those resurrected by Jason are immortal and cannot be sent back to the underworld by ordinary means. The only feasible way is to gather 3 Deathly Hallows and become the Master of Death. Death takes away existence that does not belong to this world. This sounded perfectly reasonable, but Dumbledore still had concerns. Collecting the Deathly Hallows reminded him of those unbearable memories from long ago. At this time, Nick Flamel spoke. Mr. Batman, right. He organized his words and tried to make his attitude appear friendly. It's not that we don't believe you, but until now, except for your name, we know almost nothing about you, and Batman doesn't sound like your real name. If we're going to work together, let's at least be honest with each other, right? Kadam asked, what does it mean to be honest? Nico said, at least take off your mask. That's it, no problem. Kadam took off his mask without hesitation. Then Nico gasped. Under Batman's mask, there is actually another mask. Kadam put the mask back on. Is this okay? You have seen what you should see. If you still have doubts, then there is nothing I can do. The 3 Dumbledores looked at each other and knew that Batman had made the final concession. It's time to take everything Batman said seriously. Jason disappeared, and the soul-seizing ceremony lost its allegiance. The 3 founders who were originally in Chaos may slowly pick up their true intentions. Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff are not necessarily the enemies of Hogwarts. But Slytherin is different. He always attaches great importance to blood. Now that he returns to the world and sees the decline of pure-blood wizards, how will he feel? What's more, there was Voldemort beside him to fan the flames. The Second Wizarding War is approaching. I see. Dumbledore sighed. I will find a way to find the whereabouts of the Resurrection Stone. As soon as these words came out, Nick and Newt's expressions instantly became a little strange. Don't you mean looking for the Deathly Hallows? How come you are here and all you have left is looking for the Resurrection Stone? Does it mean that you, Dumbledore, know the whereabouts of the other 2 sacred artifacts? That's good. Batman nodded. In addition, you wizards should also be prepared. If the Second Wizarding War really breaks out, it will definitely sweep the world. Dumbledore nodded. I know it well. That's good. After Batman said these words, there was nothing more to say. Dumbledore raised his head, only to find that Batman had disappeared. Is he gone? Dumbledore felt a little regretful. Actually, I still have a lot to ask him. Nicholas Flamel immediately understood what Dumbledore meant, and he solemnly warned, Albus, don't have the wrong idea. He did not specify it, and the conversation only took place within the tacit understanding between the 2. Nicholas Flamel knew about Dumbledore's past and knew that there was someone in him who wanted to be resurrected. Watching the 3 founders resurrected and returned to the world, Dumbledore could not remain indifferent. But that was wrong. The resurrection of the dead was not a power they could control. I know, Nico, I know. Dumbledore leaned back in the soft chair, feeling lost. What he was carrying now could no longer allow him to act recklessly. Dumbledore brought his thoughts back to business. The war could start at any time, and the school's teaching must be prepared. Hogwarts needs to introduce several new teachers in the next school year. He said, I have to find a few old friends. The times are different now. With a powerful enemy in front of us, we can put aside the grudges of the past. A few old friends. Nicholas Flamel did not comment. The so-called several, in fact, the most important one is only that one, right? Batman's figure appeared outside the castle. His body began to shrink and turned into the appearance of an 11-year-old child. The control of the body returned to Bruce's hands. I'm so tired. Kadam lay on Bruce's shoulder, looking like he was dying. Bruce himself also had backache, but he didn't complain. Instead, he was still immersed in the conversation between Kadam and Dumbledore. Deathly Hallows, Resurrection Stone. He muttered to himself. Don't think about it. Kadam interrupted Bruce's ambition directly. The Resurrection Stone can't revive your parents. What about the Dionysus factor? Bruce took out the test tube from his waist. There was still more than half of the Dionysus factor left, which could be used at least 7 times. That won't work either. If your parents are resurrected, you will die. The Wayne family of 3, someone had to die in that alley anyway. Bruce looked up. He wanted to say that he was willing to exchange his life for his parents. But Kadam didn't want to listen to him continue. The owl flashed, and the test tube of Dionysus factor was in his claws. Don't think about it anymore. If you don't deal with Barbados, you will never change your fate. Kadam put the test tube into the feather. I'll keep this thing for you and return it to you when you grow up. Chapter 51. Time returns to the present. When Bruce arrived at the auditorium, it was already full of people. The auditorium has been decorated, and flags and banners representing the colors of the 4 major colleges are flying above the auditorium. If we follow the original story, there should only be green and silver representing Slytherin at this time, because they won the House Cup. But today is different from the past. Slytherin himself has been resurrected, and the haze has enveloped Hogwarts. It seems a bit strange to hang the banner of Slytherin House again. So Dumbledore simply changed the tradition and dressed up the colors of all 4 houses. A moment later, Dumbledore arrived, and the noise in the auditorium gradually subsided. Another year has passed, Dumbledore said happily. This year is an extremely exciting year. Your little minds must be richer than before. There is still a whole summer vacation waiting for you. Quote. At this time, Dumbledore couldn't tell how much pressure he was carrying. He was still smiling and delivering the principal's speech. We must first conduct the Academy Cup award ceremony. The specific scores of each house are as follows. 4th place, Gryffindor, 342 points. 3rd place, Hufflepuff, 402 points. Ravenclaw 426 points. Slytherin 462 points. Bruce and Kadam's time travel caused some changes in the grades during the school year, but it was inevitable that Slytherin would still be number 1. The Slytherin table erupted in a thunderous roar of cheers and stomping of feet. On the Hufflepuff side, Kadam looked downcast. Do we have to wait for Old Den to finish talking before we can start dinner? The owl's stomach was already growling with hunger. He must start eating right away. Wait a moment. Bruce looked at Dumbledore on the stage, feeling a little sorry. It was indeed his fault for blindly doubting Dumbledore before. Dumbledore is innocent, and Bruce admits he is wrong, but he also reserves his own judgment. Dumbledore has the potential to become the Dark Lord. Yeah, good performance, Slytherin. Dumbledore said on the stage. However, several recent events must also be taken into account. The Great Hall became very quiet, and the Slytherins' smiles faded a bit. It's coming, Kadam said absently. Old Dang is going to start thinking of ways to add points to Gryffindor. It really should be Gryffindor. The founder personally protected Hogwarts. What a credit. As we all know, not long ago, Hogwarts encountered some things. Our Professor Quirrell almost put everyone in danger. Dumbledore looked at the silent students below through his half-moon glasses, but at such a critical moment, there is still a student who relied on his courage, wisdom, integrity and faith to pass through many levels set by professors. He stood in front of Quirrell. So I decided to award 100 points to Mr. Bruce Wayne. If someone were standing outside the Great Hall at this moment, they might think that there was an explosion, and the cheers at the Hufflepuff table almost knocked down the enchanted ceiling. With the bonus of 100 points, Hufflepuff wins the House Cup. Bruce was overwhelmed by the crowd, all wanting to hug the little bat. Bruce was overwhelmed by this unprecedented experience. Kadam was not much better. Some classmates who couldn't hold Bruce instead threw the owl high into the sky to celebrate. Are you sick? Kadam flapped his wings in the air a few times, cursed and flew away. Surrounded by the crowd, Bruce looked at Dumbledore on the stage with confusion, and then found that Dumbledore was also looking at him with a smile. Bruce, Dumbledore's inaudible voice rang in Bruce's ears, "Come to my office later." After the hustle and bustle, this year's year-end banquet ended with the glory of Hufflepuff. Bruce walked towards Dumbledore's office, with Cadam on his shoulders who had already eaten a ball. Still the ugly stone monster, Bruce said the password, "Lemon sherbet." The stone statue rotated, and Bruce went upstairs. After knocking on the door, Dumbledore's voice came from inside, "Please come in." Bruce opened the door. "Ah, Bruce, you are welcome." Dumbledore sat behind the table with a kind smile on his face. "Please have a seat, just like last time." As Bruce sat down, a cup of hot cocoa automatically appeared in front of him. Then the owl chirped. "Mr. Principal," Bruce said, "what did you ask me to do?" Dumbledore was silent for a moment, then said, "To apologize to you, Bruce." "Apologize? Yes, I apologize." Dumbledore sighed. "I once had very undue doubts about you. Such unfounded doubts are not what a qualified principal should have. Bruce, I solemnly apologize to you. I hope you can forgive an old man for being confused." Bruce thought for a moment and said reluctantly, "It's okay, Mr. Principal, this matter has passed." A relieved smile appeared on Dumbledore's face. "Thank you, Bruce, you have a quality like gold." He stretched out his palm and scratched it in the air, and a paper package appeared on the table. "What is this?" Bruce asked. "My apology gift to you." Dumbledore smiled. "Open it and take a look." Bruce opened the paper package, and a black cloak appeared in front of him. It was smooth and felt good to the touch. "This is a cloak woven from the hair of the Thestrals." Dumbledore explained. "The Thestrals are a very mysterious creature. They can fly, become invisible, and have strong resistance to dark magic. The cloak made of their hair perfectly inherits these abilities: flying, invisibility, and magic resistance. I think giving this cloak to an adventurous little wizard is the most appropriate gift." Dumbledore actually didn't explain some things. Thestral hair is also a substance with powerful magic power. Only wizards who can face death can master it. The core of the old wand is the tail hair of the Thestrals. After listening to the principal's introduction, Bruce seemed a little flattered. "This is too expensive, Mr. Principal, I can't accept it." Dumbledore shook his head. "Take it, Bruce. In fact, considering your contribution, this gift is already light." Bruce was puzzled. "What contribution did I make?" "You will know later, Bruce, it's too early now." Dumbledore kept it a secret. He would not explain to Bruce how big a secret he had discovered now. Dumbledore knew clearly about Bruce's disguise to find the Philosopher's Stone. After all, it was a failed disguise, and Quirrell even recognized it at a glance. But this is not the point. The point is that Batman, who appeared later, had the same outfit as Bruce. This made Dumbledore gradually understand everything. Bruce was an orphan and his father died early. Although he knew that he was a wealthy American, he could not find more clues after multiple investigations. This is almost an obvious answer. Bruce's father faked his death, and his true identity is the mysterious Batman. As long as you understand this, it is not difficult to understand why Batman appeared in Hogwarts at the critical moment. Dad came to save his son. You took care of Hogwarts, so I will take care of your son. Dumbledore thought to himself, and then handed the cloak to Bruce. By the way, I said before that I would let you learn something from me, and this invitation is still valid. Bruce returned to the dormitory with Dumbledore's gift. Loudang didn't give me cocoa. Cadam complained in Bruce's ear, making Batboy feel helpless. You were so full at the banquet just now that you couldn't drink it even if I poured it for you. Whether you drink or not is my business. The owl was very dissatisfied. I just want an attitude. Bruce shook his head and ignored Cadam's nonsense. He pulled out a box from under the bed, containing the Batman suit he had made himself. Bruce stared at the suit for a long time. Then he stretched out a finger and said, "Split into pieces." As the spell fell, the suit in the box was instantly cut into countless rags. Cadam asked, "What, you don't want to be Batman anymore?" Bruce shook his head and said, "It's just a piece of clothing." He cleared away the rags, freed the boxes, and began to pack his luggage. The school year is coming to an end, and when the test results come out, the first grade will officially end. The day for the results announcement is coming soon. Bruce ranked first in his grade, followed closely by Hermione Granger. But unexpectedly, Hermione didn't get awkward this time. On the contrary, she accepted the result calmly. At a young age, Hermione already understood that life was already so difficult and there was no need to torture herself anymore. Compared with Bruce's results, what are you looking for? Even if he gets first in grade, doesn't he still have to help carry his luggage when he leaves school? At the end of the school year, Bruce came out of the castle and once again followed Hagrid on the fleet crossing the lake. Only this time, there was no dark shadow of a giant squid swimming in the lake. The whistle of the Hogwarts train sounded, and the train started, driving through the wilderness and Muggle towns. The outside gradually became prosperous. Platform 9 3/4 arrived. Bruce and Hermione put on ordinary people's clothes and got off the train. Bruce. Neville, who was traveling with him, stammered, "I want to invite you to come to my house during the summer vacation. Of course, you and Hermione will come, is that okay?" This wasn't Neville's first invitation. Neville has been bullied at Hogwarts for the past year. Every time it was either Bruce who helped him regain his place, or Hermione who took him along. Neville's grandmother wrote several times, urging Neville to invite the two of them to their home. For Bruce, this is no problem. Just as he was about to nod in agreement, Kadam fluttered onto his shoulders. "If you can't go, refuse him." Why can't you go?" Bruce naturally thought about the worst. Neville has a conspiracy in inviting me. No, the conspiracy requires brains, and Neville can't remember it. Kadam said, "But we have to leave here and go to other worlds." In the Harry Potter world, nothing major happens during the summer vacation. Especially the summer vacation of first grade is even more dull. Instead of wasting 2 months, why not take Bruce out for a walk? But the sudden news shocked Bruce. "Are you leaving now?" "How sudden? Are we coming back?" Bruce pretended to be nonchalant. "If we don't come back, at least let me say goodbye to my aunt and the others." "What are you thinking? Of course I will come back." Kadam said, "The world is about to be stormed, and the world is in chaos. The situation is great, and it is very suitable for your growth. We are just taking advantage of the summer vacation to travel." "Wait, are you reluctant to leave?" "I didn't." Bruce denied immediately. "You still don't admit it." Owl laughed loudly. "You kid, you said before that you don't want family, for fear of having weaknesses." "I told you I didn't." Bruce changed the subject with a calm look on his face. "Since we are coming back, what reason should we use to leave?" Kadam had already thought about it. "Just say that you are going to the United States to deal with some inheritance matters, and it will take about a summer vacation." This reason makes sense. So Bruce directly learned from it and said to Neville with a regretful expression, "I'm really sorry. I'm going to the United States during the summer vacation to deal with some family matters." Neville suddenly looked disappointed. "Well, I hope you have a safe journey." "It's okay, Neville, there will be a chance in the future." Bruce patted Neville on the shoulder. "I will bring you a gift." When Bruce and Hermione walked out of the platform, Mr. and Mrs. Granger were already waiting there. In the car, Bruce said again about going to the United States. "It's about my father's family. Someone has arranged everything, so you don't have to worry." This news made Hermione feel very sudden. She had originally wanted to take Bruce to the beach. Mrs. Granger, on the other hand, had a look of dissatisfaction. "It's good that someone is there to help. I'm afraid that if I follow, I won't be able to help but yell at them." The family that abandoned her sister was simply Mrs. Granger's lifelong enemy. Mr. Granger was more thoughtful. "When you arrive in the United States, remember to report that you are safe, and tell us if you encounter any difficulties." Bruce nodded repeatedly. There was no problem in reporting that he was safe. He was still writing letters to Alfred every week, even though he couldn't receive a reply. After a few days, everything was arranged. Bruce didn't need to bring any luggage, and stuffed everything he needed into Kadam's feathers. "Let's go." Just like last time, an illusory hole opened under Bruce's feet, and he fell into it. It was still the bizarre tunnel of heavens. Kadam's claws grabbed Bruce's shoulders and took him to a strange world. This time, Bruce had experience and was no longer as panicked as before. He calmed down and passed through countless worlds, and could still vaguely hear the voices coming from those worlds. "It hurts. It hurts so much. Isolde, why are you?" "Miska, Muska, Mickey Mouse. Those who violate the territory of Dawu. Let's go for barbecue together tonight." Get ready to fight immediately. Unknowingly, Bruce had traveled a long way. He finally couldn't help but speak. Which world are we going to? Which world are we going to? Kadam said casually. I'm also looking for the answer to this question. Ah, Bruce didn't expect Kadam to do this. You brought me out without a destination. He was about to speak when he heard Kadam say, hey, this world is great. I'll take you to see the world. After that, without waiting for Bruce to react, the owl flapped its wings and took him to fall in one direction. 2050. America, wasteland. In a war that year, the X-Men disbanded and the Avengers were slaughtered. The world fell into the hands of super criminals. There have been no new heroes for 50 years. The capital of New Mexico, Santa Fe. This is the border between the United States and Mexico, full of chaos and violence. Under the appearance of the deserted and desolate city, there is a prosperity caused by crime. Actually, I'm not surprised at all by this arrangement. Bruce stood in front of a building and looked at the half-detached sign that read Santa Fe Orphanage. Really, I'm not surprised at all and I don't care. So Kadam, come down. Bruce showed a kind smile, hid his clenched fists behind his back, and called to the owl flying in the sky. Kadam flapped his wings and explained again, I have said many times that my identity is not arranged by me. Do you think I am the kind of owl who likes to joke about other people's scars? Isn't it? Bruce almost laughed angrily. He had been with Kadam for more than a year. Did the owl still make too many jokes? He didn't understand anything at first, but when the owl took him to the orphanage, he just recognized it by pinching his nose. But now it came again, which made Bruce couldn't help but start to doubt. Maybe the identity in the world was arranged by the owl, otherwise there would be no explanation for why he was placed in an orphanage twice. Does the entire universe know that Bruce Wayne is an orphan? Suffering from the lack of evidence, Bruce could only say a harsh word in the end, don't let me catch you. I'm too lazy to care about you. Kadam also has a temper. He said these words, then turned around and flew away. I chose this world before because Kadam found that the world was on the verge of destruction, and the intensity was within an acceptable range. It was just right to bring Bruce to open his eyes. Kadam only knows that this is Marvel, but which world it is exactly needs to be investigated. If you dare, don't come back. Bruce cursed and walked into the orphanage. This orphanage is very small, with only one old building. When Bruce walked inside, he didn't even see Mammy, and the others didn't care what Bruce had just done. The entire courtyard was lifeless. As a veteran orphanage reviewer, Bruce did not hesitate to give a negative review. However, Bruce couldn't really pursue the comfort of an orphanage. He just found a place to sit and waited for what would happen next. He knew that his identity arrangement was not over yet. Sure enough, as the footsteps approached, two private detectives walked in from outside the door. They compared a photo with each other and came to Bruce with joyful expressions on their faces. Bruce saw their faces clearly and frowned, why are you two again? He actually looks exactly the same as the private detective from Wu's orphanage last time. Excuse me, are you Bruce Wayne? It's me. Bruce was already familiar with the situation. Fike is dead, right? Just tell me how much you left for me. If the two private investigators haven't changed, then Bruce believes that the fake father's name hasn't changed either. Fike Wayne. The two private detectives looked at each other, not expecting that things would develop like this. But they also quickly confirmed Bruce's idea. Indeed, Fike Wayne, the head of the Wayne family in New York, died unexpectedly, leaving an inheritance for Bruce to inherit. Master Bruce. The private detective smiled flatteringly, the property you can inherit is no less than $1 billion. Bruce's eyes suddenly became sharp. What's going on? Last time it was 3 billion, but this time it's only 1 billion. He couldn't help but look at the two detectives with a scrutinizing gaze. Could it be that you two were secretly receiving kickbacks? The two private detectives immediately complained, how could they have the courage? After trying hard to explain for a long time, they convinced Bruce that in this era, it was not easy for the Wayne family to retain a billion-dollar fortune. What is this era? Bruce wanted to ask a few more questions, but the two private investigators had already left in a hurry. They only left one sentence in the end. If they wanted to inherit the billion, Bruce must go to New York himself. They were only responsible for the notification. Compared with the last century, Inheritance this time is much less humane. Bruce actually wanted to go there himself. This can only mean one thing. In the United States today, the trading systems in different places may no longer be interoperable. Bruce had a vague feeling that the world might be more uneven than he imagined. At this moment, the owl flapped its wings and flew back from a distance. The first words he said when he landed next to Bruce were, "Bruce, we won the lottery." Marvel Multiverse. Bruce heard this word from Kadam for the first time. Before he could understand further, Kadam began to say, 50 years ago, the United States had a very glorious era of superheroes, with all kinds of superheroes emerging in endlessly. Mutants, serum warriors, technological heroes, magicians, and even gods from another world formed an alliance to protect the peace of the entire world. But it was also when the Premier League era reached its peak that a sudden war destroyed everything. Superheroes are dying, and America is falling into the hands of criminals. In the end, it turned into what we see now, Kadam said as he handed Bruce a few newspapers. Bruce took them and just glanced at them, and he felt that they were really unbearable to look at. The headline on the newspaper was about the great President Red Skull, who issued an order that all people in a certain area be classified as rebels and required indiscriminate annihilation. Isn't this area the mainland of the United States? Bruce's worldview was greatly shocked, and he couldn't understand at all how a president could implement a scorched earth policy for his own country. He raised his head and looked at Kadam with doubt in his eyes. Is this kind of place really suitable for vacation? It's okay. No matter how dangerous the world is, you are always safe. The owl assured Bruce, even if you die, I can use the Dionysus factor to resurrect you. Why don't you use it now? Bruce asked. You said before that the Dionysus factor has the ability to heal itself. If you use it now, I don't even have to die. Well, Kadam seemed a little hesitant. The main reason is that I haven't figured out where this Dionysus factor came from. If it was extracted from the body of the Joker, and then I used it on you, you would be infected with the Joker virus. The Joker. Bruce heard from Kadam that this person seemed to be his future nemesis, a guy made up of madness. The purest Dionysus factor exists in the body of the Joker. Bruce couldn't help asking, what would happen if I was infected with the Joker virus? This. Kadam thought for a while. It would probably be fun. So what's going on now? Bruce asked. Is this the dark multiverse you once mentioned? Kadam shook his head. Dark universe? No, this is far out of reach. The dark multiverse in the 600th world was formerly the dark realm used by the World Forger to forge the world. The meaning of its existence is to provide the multiverse with a world full of light and hope. In other words, the real dark universe is a scrap forged by the world, a world filled only with crime and despair. But this world is different. Even though it has been taken over by supervillains, it still retains a part of its light. Let's go, Kadam said. Now that we're here, let's go to other parts of the world. Just in time. Don't you have 1 billion in New York? Let's take it out and spend it on me. Bruce thought the owl was a bit whimsical. He picked up the newspaper, pointed to the map above and said, can you please be more awake? We are in New Mexico, the southwest corner of the United States, and New York is in the northeast of the United States. You mean that we have to cross the entire United States, just for 1 billion this little money? Bruce didn't have any money right now, and Kadam's proposal was equivalent to asking them to walk across the United States. Owls can fly, but Bruce can only walk. And according to the marks on the map, there are rough mountains and rivers everywhere along the way. Hulk Gang, Green Goblin Territory, Ghost Riders, Kingpin Dynasty, Doom's Lair, Hammerfall, Ant-Man's Crossroads. Bruce didn't know what these names meant, but he knew these places were definitely trouble. He's not afraid of trouble, but he just doesn't think it's necessary. If he really crossed these places, Bruce doubted that he would be able to reach the other side in 2 months. Then let's find a few people to go with. The owl had a flash of inspiration, clenched its wings and stretched out a feather. Hey, I have a good candidate. Who? Bruce asked. Why does this owl seem to have connections everywhere? This world once had a superhero. Kadam said. His name is Wolverine. Speaking of which, he is still one of your seniors. In the past, Kadam was careless and passed away after listening to Blues for Fun, but now it is said that this world has its own senior. What? the people in Hogwarts are randomly refreshed across the universe. But Kadam swore firmly, I'm not talking nonsense. The uniform is yellow and black, and the prototype is a Wolverine. This is not a graduate of Hufflepuff. No one will believe it. Looking at his appearance, Wolverine must be given a school certificate today. Bruce was too lazy to argue with the owl anymore. Okay, where should we find him? Well, Kadam couldn't give an answer for a while. Speaking of which, this world is not exactly the universe of The Return of the Wolf, nor is it the universe of The Wolverine 3, but more like a combination of the two. According to known information, the X-Men were completely wiped out, but Professor X himself was not dead, but was determined to be missing. Also missing with him was Wolverine Logan. Therefore, Kadam has reason to suspect that the current Wolverine does not form an ordinary family like in the comics, and his destiny has deviated. Of course, Owl will not think that Professor X is still alive after 50 years. In that case, go and see the US-Mexico border. Kadam said, we also just experienced the feeling of reverse wiring. In the desolate border area, a dilapidated car drove rapidly on the dusty road, and finally stopped beside a dilapidated warehouse. The car door opened, and a tired man got out. The man looked to be in his 70s, with a messy beard and pale hair. His once sharp eyes were now bloodshot and he was depressed. He is Logan Howlett, the former superhero Wolverine. Compared with the image in Wolverine 3, he is older. He entered the depths of the warehouse and pushed open the door. Inside was a hospital bed covered with intravenous drips. The person lying on the bed was already skin and bones, with a haggard appearance, and it seemed that he was on his deathbed. No one could recognize that this was the once famous Professor X. Next to the hospital bed, there was another old man sitting. He was also in his twilight years, but his spirit was completely different from Logan's. Thank you for your hard work, Clint. Logan called out the old man's name. He was Clint Barton, the former Avengers Hawkeye. This archer who used to be a perfect shot has now lost nearly 100% of his vision due to glaucoma. Logan bent down and placed the bag full of medicine on the bedside table, then supported his waist and barely stood up. Has he woke up? No. Hawkeye shook his head. Looks like it's just in the next few days. Right. When Logan heard this, a hint of complexity flashed in his eyes. He looked at the old man on the hospital bed who had almost completely lost all awareness of the outside world, with mixed feelings in his heart. That's fine. After a long time, Logan said, it's a good thing that he is free. Logan, are you really not going to help me? At this time, Hawkeye spoke, what are you going to do after the professor is gone? Our lives have come to an end, and we should always burn it. That's why Clint Hawkeye is still here. He wanted to ask Logan to do something big, but the reply he got every time was rejection. So much so that Hawkeye simply stayed here and refused to leave until he got a positive answer. And Logan was untouched by this. He simply used Hawkeye as a nanny and asked him to take care of the dying Professor X. I will never fight another person again. Logan still said the same thing, Clint, give up on this. When Hawkeye heard these words, he didn't react much. After all, people have been rejected a lot and are used to it. Sudden, cough cough cough. There was a faint coughing sound from the hospital bed, and Professor X woke up from his sleep. Professor. Logan quickly helped the professor up and patted him on the back. After Professor X calmed down, Logan helped Professor X lie down. Thank you, Hank. Professor X thanked him in a thin voice. Hawkeye sighed. Professor, he is Logan, not Hank. Hank has long. Hank, a former member of the X-Men, codenamed Beast, died 50 years ago. A feeling that things are different and people are different grows in Hawkeye's heart. The once most powerful mind in the world is now completely demented and cannot even recognize the people around him. Professor X was still talking, this time to Hawkeye. Scott, why are you here alone? Where is Jean? Scott, codenamed Cyclops, was also an X-Men who died 50 years ago. Hawkeye felt even sadder. I'm not Cyclops, I just have glaucoma now. Professor X's awakening this time was different from before, and his condition was much better. But this was not something to be happy about. Logan knew in his heart that this state was just a reflection of the professor's past. He really doesn't have much time. Okay. Professor X was very happy. He stretched out his hands to both sides and squeezed Logan and Hawkeye. We are reunited here again, aha, and there are new guests. Then he raised his head, faced the empty front, and lowered his voice, as if talking to a child. Good boy, have you just come to this world? I see your heart. You are carrying something very heavy. Don't worry, although sometimes you will feel confused and sometimes you will be disappointed with yourself, but it doesn't matter. We are not perfect. Man, you are already great. Logan sighed heavily. The old guy is sick again. Clint, help me hold him down while I give him medicine. But when he said this, Professor X also heard it. Professor, no, can you be quiet and don't disturb my communication with him? Professor, it's not up to you. Logan only thought Professor X was talking nonsense. He worked with Hawkeye, two gray-haired old men, to suppress the hairless Charles. Logan injected the sedative into Professor X's body. The professor's spirit suddenly weakened, and he muttered inaudible words. Logan breathed a sigh of relief. If it were just an ordinary old man suffering from dementia, there would be no need to go to such trouble. But this is Professor. There have been many similar tragedies over the past 50 years. Although it is cruel to think this way, if Charles is really going to die, Logan hopes that it is best for him to die silently in his sleep and go into that good night quietly. Don't have an explosion before you die. When you leave by yourself, you must take a group of people with you. Hank. Professor, I'm not Hank. Logan didn't take the professor's words to heart at all. He first corrected Charles's address to him, then softened his expression, patted Professor X on the back, and helped him lie down. Stop imagining things, no one will come. Also, although this world is indeed in a terrible state, talking about destruction is too ridiculous, right? When you were young, Charles, you relied on telepathy to pretend to be a magician. Now that you are old and confused, you are pretending to be a prophet again. Almost done. But just when Logan was about to put Charles to sleep, Hawkeye, who had been silent next to him, suddenly spoke. Logan. Hawkeye listened to the movement outside the door. Someone is coming. Listen to the footsteps, it's a child. Logan was immediately speechless. Is the old guy not confused this time? Go forward and turn left at the end. On Bruce's shoulder, an owl directed him where to go. How come you suddenly know the way? Bruce frowned. Weren't you still aimless just now? You think I do. Kadam sighed. There is an old man chattering in my head, and I don't even want to know. Old man, it's Professor X, a former leader. I thought he was dead long ago. Kadam said, speaking of which, he probably wanted to talk to you, but your brain occluding spell was not lifted, and your head and mine were too close, so the call was mistakenly dialed to me. Owl couldn't help but sigh. Professor. Bruce is a little strange. He is not surprised by telepathy. There are similar methods in the magical world. But I have just arrived in this world, why would anyone want to find me? What did you and the old man talk about? We didn't talk about anything, Kadam said. We just discussed what to do if the child disobeys. If you don't want to say it, forget it. Bruce shook his head and continued walking along the path pointed by the owl. When he turned the corner, he saw a dilapidated warehouse. In front of the warehouse, there were two old men waiting there. Is this the hope the professor was talking about? Logan frowned and saw Bruce from a distance. After looking at him, he found that except for an owl on his shoulder, there was nothing special about him. Hawkeye looked very happy. It seems that what the professor said is true. He has indeed found a soul that is not contaminated by sin. He stepped forward to greet Bruce's arrival. Bruce only saw an old man with white hair tied in a ponytail walking toward him with a smile on his face. It was unclear whether he was a friend or an enemy. The old man was getting closer and closer, and this behavior without a sense of boundaries made him feel very uncomfortable. The other party wore round sunglasses, and when he moved, he looked like a blind man. Deliberately pretending to be blind, trying to arouse your own sympathy. Bruce was unsure, so he turned sideways and stretched out his leg to try to trip Hawkeye. As expected, Hawkeye stopped before he was about to be tripped. Ha ha ha, you are still quite vigilant. Good. If you want to survive in this era, you must be so cautious. Hawkeye bent down and tried his best to show his friendliness. Don't be afraid, we are not bad people. Clint raised his hands to show that he had no ill intentions. Someone said you were a good kid and guided you here. We believe him, so we believe you too. My name is Clint Barton. What's your name? Bruce glanced at the owl, asking if he could trust this person. Don't worry, Kadam said. This old man is limited in strength and is not a big threat. Bruce was relieved now. My name is Bruce Wayne. Good name, good name. Quote, Hawkeye was a little too enthusiastic. He motioned Bruce to go with him. Come on, someone wants to see you. He seems a little too happy. Bruce walked behind Kadam and said. Maybe you gave him hope. Kadam said casually. In fact, if there is anyone in this world who is still full of passion, wants to avenge his lost partners, and wants to reverse this dark world, it is only the old Hawkeye. He never gave up his beliefs, so after losing his eyesight, he also learned from the old Daredevil how to maintain combat effectiveness in a blind state. It's a pity that he has no superpowers after all, and his strength is limited. Kadam guessed why Hawkeye was with Wolverine. He was looking for a partner to do big things. But now Wolverine is no longer a superhero. As expected, Hawkeye has been rejected many times. Many people say that what Hawkeye does is meaningless, and the current world is not worth saving. But now Bruce's appearance gives Hawkeye the answer. Isn't a child with a promising future worth protecting? In fact, Hawkeye can't see through the foggy future, but someone has to support the children's tomorrow. When they entered Professor X's room, Professor X had already fallen asleep. He was motionless and slept peacefully. It's a bit unfortunate. Hawkeye kept the smile on his face. Let's wait for a while. It's okay. Let's use this time to get to know each other. Bruce had seen the old man lying on the bed. It was hard to believe that such a scrawny old man could be the former leader of the mutants according to Kadam. He looked at the other two old men. One is sitting on the sofa, holding a wine bottle in his hand to drink for himself. He just wants to indulge himself in alcohol and is completely uninterested in everything outside. Is this person the Wolverine Logan mentioned by Kadam? A hero who has saved the world many times. Too fake. Bruce saw only deep decadence in this old man, without any heroic spirit. Although Hawkeye on the other side was better, he was too enthusiastic and made himself look like a strange old man. Is this what superheroes look like in their later years? Bruce felt that his outlook on life had been subverted. If I become a hero, will I be like this in my later years? No, 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 don't worry. Kadam quickly comforted. If it were the original you, there is a high probability that you will not have old age. So don't worry. Bruce took a deep breath to calm himself. The beak of an owl is worse than the cry of a crow. Bruce, would you like something to drink? The elderly Hawkeye opened the refrigerator, just like the grandpa next door, and searched for anything for the children. But he forgot that this was Wolverine's refrigerator, and there was only wine in it. After searching for a long time, Hawkeye found 2 bottles of mineral water and handed one of them to Bruce. I'm so sorry, kid, these are the only things at home. Thanks. Bruce took the mineral water, and Hawkeye sat next to him. Bruce, where did you come from? Hawkeye asked curiously. I mean, you came here alone. Bruce shook his head and pointed at Kadam. No, I came with him. Hawkeye showed a look of realization. I understand, you and your animal companions act together. I have had teammates like this before. Their animal companions were all kinds of interesting, including kestrels, ants, and raccoons. When he talked about the past, it seemed like he was back 50 years ago. Bruce didn't want to interrupt an old man's memories, so he could only listen on the sidelines with a water bottle in his hand, silently. But Hawkeye keeps nagging, which is indeed a bit presumptuous. Speaking of which, I once had a friend named Falcon. He could communicate with birds. I learned a few tricks from him. Hawkeye seemed to want to get closer to Bruce as soon as possible and tried hard to find a topic. He looked at the owl on Bruce's shoulder. How about it, do you want me to show it to you? After saying that, without waiting for Bruce's consent, he started a conversation with Kadam on his own. Hi Birdie, how are you? Kadam, idiot. Hawkeye's smile remained unchanged, and he pointed at the owl and said to Bruce, look, your little bird was saying hello to me just now. Bruce didn't reveal it. He just blamed Kadam through telepathy. Can you be civilized? The other party is an old man after all. I'm the most civilized owl in the whole world. Kadam sneered again and again. When will this old man find out that Professor X is dead? Bruce, Perhaps, a world that is about to be destroyed is always full of surprises. It is natural for happy events to turn into mourning. When Bruce politely offered to go see Professor X, the two old men, Logan and Clint, finally discovered that Professor X had died in his sleep. Perhaps they had been mentally prepared for it, and they quickly accepted the fact in silence. The two held a simple funeral for Professor X and then buried him next to a lake. At least it's close to the water and has a bit of the feel of Xavier School back in the day. May he rest in peace soon. Hawkeye crouched in front of the professor's tombstone, with Logan standing behind him. Although their expressions were solemn, they did not show much sadness. In this era, death is not a bad thing for Professor X today. Moreover, the day when the two old men Hawkeye and Logan will reunite with Professor X will not be far away. It's just a pity. He actually wants to see you. Hawkeye stood up and came to Bruce's side. He said you were guided here by hope. I don't know what he meant. Maybe he was saying that you will inherit the mantle of our superhero. I actually have a lot of stories I want to tell you, about the past Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, and a series of other seniors. But there's no time now, Bruce. I'm really glad I could get to know you before we go. The death of Professor X strengthened a certain belief in Hawkeye's heart. He realized that he too was getting old and death would come at any time. What he wanted to do couldn't be put off any longer. Since Wolverine doesn't want to join, then he can do it alone, even if the result is to be broken into pieces. Bruce's gaze remained on Professor X's grave. It's not like he's never seen death before, but this is the first time he's seen the end of a superhero. Bruce didn't know Professor X, nor did he know what he had done. He only heard about his past deeds from K'Toon. But no matter what, Professor X must have had passionate years. But now, he has gone silently, without a coffin, and even the tombstone is just a simple wooden board. Bruce really can't help but think about it. Will he be like this in the future? Burning a lifetime for justice, and then dying in an empty corner. Is this the price of being a hero? Can he accept this ending? K'Toon, Bruce suddenly asked, is this why you brought me to this world? Maybe. K'Toon's answer was ambiguous. Their conversation did not continue because Hawkeye was leaving. When he passed by Logan, Logan suddenly asked, where are you going? You know it. Hawkeye pretended to be relaxed. I'm going to the New Utopia to burn my last youth. New Utopia. Suddenly, Bruce's voice came. Is this New Utopia the New York of the past? He was still not used to the name New York, because in the 600th world, there is no New York, only Gotham and Metropolis. And Hawkeye was also in a trance because of the name New York. This is really a long-lost memory. I guess so. Hawkeye said, what's wrong? Take me with you. Bruce stated his purpose. Actually, I wanted to go to New York, but it's inconvenient to go alone. Hawkeye subconsciously wanted to refuse. What I do is very dangerous. I can protect myself. Bruce interrupted Hawkeye. He stretched out his hand and a stone in the distance automatically floated in front of him. Logan, who had always remained silent, suddenly frowned. Are you a mutant? He naturally thought about this, otherwise why would Professor X say that Bruce was Hope? Bruce did not comment, just looked at Hawkeye quietly. Hawkeye frowned for a long time before making a decision. Okay, but I'm only responsible for taking you to the New Utopia. That's enough. Bruce walked to Hawkeye, stood side by side with him, and prepared to leave. At this time, Hawkeye turned back and asked Wolverine one last question. Logan, are you really not joining? I won't go. Logan refused without hesitation. In this era, there is nothing worth protecting. Hawkeye was helpless. There was an important reason why he kept inviting Logan. He was a blind man, and it was somewhat difficult for him to cross the United States. Hawkeye finally persuaded. But what can you do next? Professor X has passed away, and you are alone from now on. There are many things I can do. Logan was not shaken at all. I will make some money first, and then. You want to make money, right? Bruce suddenly spoke. I was going to New York to inherit the family property. How about I hire you as my guide now? I can give you this number. After speaking, he stretched out a finger. Bruce will only stay in this world for 2 months at most, and there is no place to spend the 10 billion family property. K'Toon has been saying that he will spend all the money on him. In Bruce's eyes, this is no different from throwing money into the trash can. In this case, it is better to offer Logan a higher price. 10 million should be about the same. You're going to give me a commission of $10,000. Logan was tempted. This amount of money was not a small amount. For him now, it was even a huge sum that he could not earn in several years. Bruce realized that Logan had misunderstood. He was going to give 10 million, not 10,000. But before he could explain, Logan nodded, as if he was afraid that Bruce would regret it. $10,000, deal. But he still emphasized, I am only a guide, and I will never fight, unless you can't pay the money in the end. After that, Logan stepped forward and pushed Hawkeye. Don't stand there, let's go. The garage slowly opened, revealing a red convertible SUV with a spider web pattern on the body. Spider Chariot. Logan recognized this unusual SUV. How did it get into your hands? After Spider-Man died, this car belonged to me. Hawkeye smiled and sat in the driver's seat, motioning him to drive. Logan, as a guide, was responsible for looking at the map and paying attention to the road conditions. How about I drive? Logan was a little worried about Hawkeye's vision. No, I can do it myself, get in the car. Logan sat in the passenger seat, Bruce and Kadam sat in the back. Hawkeye touched the steering wheel, sighing. You are still good to me. Hawkeye said with emotion, I used to run a taxi for a living, but I was treated very badly. That group of people discriminated against me because I was blind and refused to take my car. It's okay, we don't discriminate against you, Logan said, but his hand reached for the buckle of the seat belt, trying to get out of the car secretly. How could Hawkeye give him this opportunity? He stepped on the accelerator suddenly, and the roar of the engine instantly broke the silence of the border wasteland. The tires rubbed against the dry ground, raising a burst of smoke and dust. The Spider Chariot seemed to be injected with life, like a wild beast running away, rushing towards the unknown road ahead. Hawkeye's driving skills are unique. Although he lost his sight, he could accurately judge the road conditions with his superior hearing and keen perception. Under his control, the Spider Chariot shuttled through the wasteland like a flexible snake, leaving a trail of flying dust. I told you to rest assured, Hawkeye said while driving, with a bit of pride in his voice. Although I can't see, I can hear the sound of the tires rubbing against the ground, and feel the wind speed and direction. Many people with normal vision may not have as good driving skills as me. Okay, Logan couldn't get out of the car now, so he had to accept his fate. He opened the map and studied the route. Although the places along the way are very dangerous and entrenched in various forces, there are some places we can bypass. Logan's fingers moved slowly on the map. First, we will pass through the territory of the Hulk gang. It was originally very dangerous, but Bruce Banner went out recently, and his green fools temporarily stopped. Then we will pass the Ghost Riders to Hammerfall, and finally cross the Ant-Man crossroads to reach the New Utopia. Quote. Hawkeye whistled happily. Thanks to you, Logan. With a clear route, Hawkeye stepped on the accelerator and the Spider Chariot began to speed. It was under such circumstances that the extraordinary features of this chariot were revealed. It does not need to do any dodging along the way. If it encounters a cliff, it can continue to move forward. The tires of the chariot have been specially treated and can run on vertical cliffs. The structural design of the Spider Chariot is even more amazing. Even if it falls from a height of tens of meters, the vehicle itself can still remain intact. The passengers inside are like being in an indestructible protective shell, and will not feel the impact of the outside world at all. They are safe. Bruce sat in the back seat, stroking the armrest of the chariot, and his heart was moved. Batman also wanted to drive. Kadam, what do you think about me getting a car like this in the future? Bruce said, paint it black, and I will patrol Gotham every night. It must feel great. Whatever you want. Quote, Kadam said casually, just be careful not to get the tires pried off. The Spider Chariot roared and ran all the way. After the initial novelty wore off, the scenery along the way began to look the same, all desert rock walls and tumbleweeds, and Logan had already closed his eyes and fell asleep. Bruce also yawned. This journey was more boring than he had imagined. They had walked about 300 kilometers and left the territory of the Hulk gang. Bruce began to feel bored when he thought of the thousands of kilometers to go. Can't you use apparition to take us directly to New York? Bruce asked Kadam. It wouldn't take much energy, right? You ask me to help, so I will. Kadam refused without thinking. You don't even want to call me Godfather. Forget it. Bruce also closed his eyes, pretending that the conversation just now had never happened. Gradually, the sky began to darken, and in front of them, the outline of an abandoned city appeared. Let's spend the night here today. Hawkeye turned around. Wait until tomorrow morning before setting off. They entered this abandoned urban area that was once prosperous. The abandoned building stood like a giant in the dark night, with cracks and peeling marks on the outer wall, and the city was dead silent. Dust covered every inch of land, and abandoned vehicles were scattered in between, with broken windows and flat tires. The lampposts were entangled with withered vines, and the wires swayed in the wind, making bursts of wailing. Do you think there are still living people here? Hawkeye asked curiously. Logan in the passenger seat twitched his nose, smelled the surrounding smell, and then gave the answer. No, it's all moldy here, without any smell of living people. Okay, Hawkeye had guessed the answer, and he parked the chariot beside the abandoned road, and several people got off the car to find a safe place. Let's rest here for the night. You sit for a while, I'll make a fire. After he finished speaking, Logan suddenly objected. There's no need to make a fire. He pointed to the distance, where several ghost-faced Harleys were coming towards them. The roar of the motors was a furious roar, leaving behind a line of fire that separated light and darkness. The Ghost Riders are here. Ghost Riders. Bruce stared into the distance, and as the distance got closer, the other party's figure gradually became clearer. Flames jumped on the tires of those motorcycles, leaving hot lines wherever they passed. The knights were dressed in black spiked leather clothes, waving fire chains in their hands, drawing dazzling flames in the air, and every swing was accompanied by creepy screams. When the Ghost Riders just appeared, Hawkeye immediately warned. Protect Bruce. Before he finished speaking, the knights had arrived. A ghost motorcycle passed over Hawkeye's head, and the knight on it kicked Hawkeye on the head. Hawkeye screamed, bleeding, and fell to the ground. Logan. Hawkeye called Wolverine's name, wanting him to help. Then he found that Logan didn't even look back, and ran directly to the spider chariot. He looked like a teammate in trouble, turning around like the wind. Wolverine actually escaped. Bruce on the other side was dumbfounded. He was not afraid, but was completely stunned by Hawkeye and Logan's performance. Weren't these two guys superheroes in the past? How could they perform so badly? Logan was still running wildly, with only the spider chariot in the distance in his eyes. That place, as long as he could get there. But suddenly, a fire chain came and entangled Logan's feet, tripping him to the ground. Then, several Mohawk knights surrounded him and punched and kicked Logan. Old man, you still want to run. They cursed and kicked Logan. But Logan had no desire to fight back. He hugged his head and huddled up, allowing others to abuse him. You can kill or chop them up as you like. Logan gritted his teeth and said, I will never attack anyone again. You are so arrogant. The Ghost Riders were all happy. One of them picked up a baseball bat full of nails and was about to cut Logan's head. At this moment, a huge rock floated and flew over, knocking the minion away. Then the rock rolled and pressed several Ghost Riders down heavily. It was Bruce who finally couldn't stand it anymore and chose to take action. He first took a look at the minions under the stone. Will they not crush anyone to death? Bruce frowned and said, I don't want to kill anyone. Kadam motioned him to rest assured. Of course they won't crush anyone to death. Don't you see they are still breathing? As long as these people are not dead now, Bruce's principle of not killing will not be broken. That's good. Bruce said this, then walked up to Logan and reached out to help him stand up. At this time, Bruce was finally disappointed with this old hero. I thought he was going to retire to the mountains, but he turned out to be too old to be useful. Is this the Wolverine that Kadam has been praising? Is he fooling himself again? There are more and more ghost knights around, and Bruce's behavior just now has completely angered them. However, just when they wanted to attack Bruce, a sound of breaking through the air came. An arrow directly pierced through the head of a minion. The opponent fell to the ground wailing. Bruce looked back and saw Hawkeye's face covered with blood, and a short bow appeared in his hand. He closed his eyes and did not need any visual help. He determined the position of all enemies by listening to the sound. The minions of the knights were attracted by Hawkeye. They made strange noises and swung the fire chain to pounce on him. Hawkeye finally regained his former superhero style at this time. His white hair was disheveled and he tightened the bowstring. Every time an arrow was shot, a ghost knight fell to the ground. The knights came like a tide. The white-haired Hawkeye stood in the center, calm and composed. He just drew his bow and shot arrows, and no one could get close to him. As the arrows continued to be fired, the minions of the evil spirit group fell one after another. In the end, only Hawkeye was still standing. The battle was over. Hawkeye's tense state suddenly relaxed. He gasped and his old age was revealed. "Logan, what's wrong with you? Why are you so cowardly?" Hawkeye staggered to Logan's side, his tone full of anger and questioning. "You don't even dare to take action against such a small fool. What happened to you back then? It has nothing to do with you. This is my way of life now." Logan was dejected, with a look of complete mental collapse. He turned back to the car. "Let's go. It's not safe here anymore. Let's go to the next location overnight." Hawkeye was disappointed, but he was helpless after all. He could only sigh and signal Bruce to get in the car. The spider chariot started again and left the battlefield full of corpses. The next morning, after a night of travel, they finally arrived at Hammerfall. This is a relatively peaceful city in troubled times, where countless homeless people gathered. Hawkeye drove slowly through the city. "I was able to survive because those villains thought I was useless, without superpowers, and posed no threat to them," Hawkeye said as if talking to himself. "But what about you? Logan, how did you and Professor X survive?" Logan lowered his head and said nothing, not wanting to answer Hawkeye's question. At this time, a quarrel broke out on the roadside. A group of gangster-looking people were beating up a thin guy. But the man who was beaten not only did not fight back, but also had a flattering smile on his face. He was also wearing a blue and white inferior battle uniform. That's the style of Captain America's suit. The man who was beaten was dressed as Captain America. Finally, the group of thugs got tired and stopped their violence. Captain America suddenly smiled and said, "Brothers, are you enjoying the fight?" "Well enough." A gangster smiled and threw a few crumpled bills on. "Captain America, I will come to patronize your business next time." Captain America nodded and bowed. "Welcome to come again next time. This is the industry in Hammerfell. You can make money by dressing up as a superhero and humiliating others." Seeing this scene, Logan suddenly spoke. "Don't just talk about me. Captain America is your former comrade, right?" he said coldly. "You don't have any feelings after seeing this scene." But Hawkeye's expression remained unchanged and he said, "I can't see, I'm blind." At this time, Bruce was silent and full of disappointment. He didn't expect that the former hero would become like this in his old age. Can this really be called a hero? The spider chariot slowly arrived in the city center, where a group of people formed a circle and were kneeling to worship. The object they knelt down to was the origin of the name of Hammerfell. 50 years ago, a god fell here and left behind his weapons. Because no one could lift it, it has been preserved to this day. "Ah, it's Mjolnir." Kadam leaned out of the window and saw the object of worship. A nearly broken Thor's hammer fell quietly there. "Speaking of which, this hammer doesn't suit you a bit." Kadam thought for a while and said, "Your future teammates, Superman and Wonder Woman, have all lifted this hammer, but you have never lifted it. How about it? Do you want to try it this time and see if you can lift it?" Bruce shook his head and refused without thinking. "No, I won't lift." "Bruce, are you interested in Thor's hammer?" Hawkeye noticed that Bruce's eyes had been fixed on Thor's hammer in the distance. He laughed and decided to give Bruce some more motivation. "As long as you can get Thor's hammer's approval and successfully lift it, you can have the power of Thor. How about it? Are you tempted? Are you sure you're not telling the story of the sword and the stone?" Bruce retracted his gaze and had no intention of trying. Thor's hammer was on the verge of breaking, and it was covered with cracks. Even if it could be lifted, how long could it be used? And what does it mean to be approved by the hammer? If you are approved by the hammer, you are Thor, and if you are not approved, you are not. That's not Thor, it's Hammer God. Bruce's attitude surprised Hawkeye. In the past 50 years, almost everyone who has seen Thor's hammer will try to lift it at least once. Because it represents the power and status of the gods, no one will not be interested. Hawkeye is not kidding. After all, even the owl beside Bruce went to lift the hammer. Until then, Bruce realized that Khatum was gone. He turned his head and saw that the owl had flown out of the car at some point and was clinging to the hammer, holding the hammer handle with its wings tightly, pulling out Thor's hammer like pulling a carrot. He kept exerting force, but Thor's hammer did not move at all. Obviously, Khatum did not get the approval of Thor's hammer. Bruce was immediately furious. Khatum finally flew back indignantly. It stands to reason that to lift Thor's hammer, one needs integrity, kindness, courage, and fearlessness. Khatum met all these qualities, but why couldn't he lift it? The spider chariot continued to drive slowly in the market. Suddenly, a robot stopped in front of the chariot and greeted Hawkeye enthusiastically. The robot was wearing human clothes and holding a brown paper bag, looking like it had just come back from shopping. "Oh, Hawkeye, thank God you are here. It's me, Ultron 8. He obviously had something to do with Hawkeye, and couldn't wait to ask, "Have you heard any news from Toya recently?" Hearing the name Toya, Hawkeye suddenly became uneasy. He stretched out of the car and talked to the robot Ultron 8. Khatum knew the relationship between the two. Ultron 8 was actually the former Ultron, who had been degenerating from generation to generation and became the ghost he is today, and even ordinary people couldn't beat him. The Toya he mentioned was Spider-Man's daughter. Hawkeye was her first husband, and Ultron 8 was her second. So in a way, they were kindred spirits. This time they talked about Hawkeye and Toya's daughter, Ashley. She was rebellious by nature, and because she wanted to challenge Kingpin's position, she failed in the challenge and was arrested. She will be publicly executed tomorrow. Ultron 8 is the stepfather who came to ask his biological father for help. Khatum had no interest in saving Ashley. Ashley was a lunatic. The current events were probably developing in accordance with Hometown. According to the original plot, after being rescued by Hawkeye, Ashley killed Kingpin and became the new boss of this land. Then the first thing she did when she came to power was to kill her father to establish her authority. Poor Bruce didn't even want his own father, but Ashley wanted to kill her own father. In order to take care of the child's emotions, Khatum decided to keep Bruce away from Ashley. "Everyone, let's take a rest in Hammerfall for a day, how about that?" When Hawkeye turned around, he had made a decision. He was going to save his daughter. The best time to save Ashley was at night. It happened that they had been traveling all night last night, and it was a reasonable suggestion to take a rest now. Hawkeye did not ask for help from others. In his opinion, Logan was too cowardly and Bruce was too young to join this action. Logan and Bruce had no objection to this, so they followed Hawkeye to the home of the 8th generation of Ultron. Hawkeye thought that there shouldn't be any problem if they just waited for a day. Kingpin Dynasty, Arena. It's called the Arena, but it's actually a dilapidated gymnasium. Here, several minions are cleaning the venue, because there will be a grand show here tonight. Ashley, who assassinated Kingpin, will be executed tomorrow, and her men will fight with the dinosaurs raised by Kingpin tonight until they die. Kingpin's men are looking forward to this show. However, just as the group of people were cleaning, a passage suddenly opened in the void. This change attracted everyone's attention, and they stared at the passage in a daze, not knowing what happened. A figure slowly walked out of the passage. When he walked out completely and the passage closed, the group of minions could see the other party's full appearance. The man's face was covered by a tactical helmet that was half yellow and half black. On the left side of the helmet was a striking red eye mask, revealing a single cold eye under the eye mask. The right side was completely covered by a black mask, and two bright red ribbons were flying behind the helmet. He was wearing a fully armed metal armor, equipped with various tactical weapons, and carrying a long sword and a short stick on his back. Such a person, even if he just stood there, was like a star of evil. The second pursuer who was chasing Bruce had arrived. He is Deathstroke, whose real name is Slade Wilson. He is one of the most famous mercenaries and assassins in the DC universe, a master of strategy and tactics, a master of fighting, and a master of all weapons. He has top physical fitness, extraordinary self-healing ability, and 90% development of the brain. He only works for money and charges sky-high fees, but he will definitely satisfy his employer. At this time, Deathstroke, who had just arrived in this universe, immediately felt the gazes from all directions, and he was under the gaze of the crowd. This made Deathstroke feel a little insecure. It was also the first time for him to come to a new world to perform a mission, and everything was equivalent to starting from scratch. There were no safe houses all over the world, no various means of transportation and supplies, no intelligence and relationship networks, and he didn't even know what the currency of this world was. Everything was zero. Coupled with the curious eyes that he immediately cast when he just set foot in this world, Deathstroke felt that although he was fully armed, he was still naked and was being pointed at. This feeling has not happened for decades. Deathstroke was not satisfied with this start. His lack of security must be made up. At this moment, one of Kingpin's minions bravely asked, "Who are you? Do you know where this place is?" Coincidentally, Deathstroke didn't know where this place was. He looked at the minion who spoke with his cold left eye, and spoke with a hint of mechanical reverberation in his voice. "You asked a good question," he said, "then you can die last. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more."